Jasper chuckled at Julian's words. He patted Julian's shoulder and laughed softly. I don't need you to give me your life. You just have to stay by my side and work hard. I won't mistreat you, he said. Julian nodded slowly. He had previously come here to destroy Jasper. Although Jasper had given him $2 million, he had also kept to his words and chosen not to take revenge on him. Despite this, Julian knew that Jasper absolutely dared to do so. Julian had watched how Jasper defeated Mark Zion and Steve Quare right before his very eyes. He knew that if Jasper intended to seek vengeance against him, that he would easily be vanquished despite his abilities. He could escape, but what about his sister? Nevertheless, not only did Jasper choose not to take revenge on him, but he also treated him well and employed him as his personal bodyguard. Julian viewed Jasper as his saving grace due to the kindness he had bestowed upon him. Thus, he decided to stay by Jasper's side loyally and continue protecting him in the future. Anyone who wants to bring harm to Mr. Lane will have to do so over my dead body, Julian said solemnly. At that moment, Jasper was holding hands with Wendy as they left the ward and headed downstairs. Thus, he did not hear Julian's words. With their financial power, Kathy's transfer procedure went smoothly. The procedure was completed within half an hour. While waiting for the operation to be completed, Jasper met up with Mr. Lambert. Mr. Lane, take a look. This is the contract for the shipyard. It has already been signed, Mr. Lambert said. He took out the contract and held it before Jasper with both hands. Jasper took the contract and flipped through it. I will arrange for someone to take over later. In the meantime, find a few reliable men to look after the shipyard, he ordered. The shipyard was equipped with top-notch facilities. The raw materials stored there were extremely valuable as well. If nobody looked after the place, the materials may be stolen by greedy people. It would be unwise to underestimate these people. There was once a gang of 7 to 8 thieves that stole a batch of steel worth tens of millions in 3 days. Their skills were comparable to that of a professional transport and demolitions team. Mr. Lambert patted his chest and said, "Don't worry, Mr. Lane. With me there, nobody will be allowed into the shipyard." Has the project commenced? Jasper asked. Mr. Lambert chuckled. It started this morning, without the Zions causing trouble. Those few stubborn jerks signed the agreement at once and moved away. The project is progressing very smoothly right now, he replied. Jasper nodded. The resettlement compensation provided to normal households that have been demolished must be in strict accordance with the regulations. Meanwhile, welfare protection must be in place for the migrant workers. Wage arrears are absolutely prohibited, he added. These rules are to be stated in black and white, and nobody is allowed to breach them. If anyone causes trouble due to noncompliance, I'll fire them immediately. Is this understood? Mr. Lambert had a solemn expression on his face. Understood, Mr. Lane, he replied at once. Jasper nodded. In that case, you can continue with your tasks. If anything comes up, get in contact with the provincial headquarters. I can't watch the project in Bragg County every day, he said. In short, you will have indispensable benefits if you do well. An executive like you can get dividends from the project's profits, so you'll be rewarded with at least a few $100,000. However, if you don't do well, whoever is in charge will have to take responsibility. As the manager, there's no way you can escape from the brunt of the punishment. I understand, Mr. Lane. I'll get going then, Mr. Lambert replied courteously. Waving Mr. Lambert off, Jasper accompanied Wendy into the car. An ambulance followed them, which Julian and his sister were seated in. They all headed back to the province together. It was already late into the evening when they arrived at the province. Jasper originally planned to let Julian send Kathy to the hospital and settle down before coming to work on the next day. However, Julian came back immediately after sending Kathy to the hospital and ensuring that everything was all right. Jasper did not send him away either. Back at the Schuler's household, Dawson had already arranged for their meals to be prepared while he waited for them. You handled the incident at Bragg County pretty well, Dawson told Jasper with a smile. Jasper chuckled in response. It's all thanks to your support, Uncle Schuler. Your phone call alone managed to crush almost half the Zions, he said. Shaking his head, Dawson replied, the Zions' most important assets are in that shipyard. When those people saw that the Zions shipyard had been destroyed, They began outsmarting each other. It was brought about by a collective effort. My phone call only fueling the fire and sped up the process. Right? I heard that you've taken over the Zion's shipyard? Dawson asked curiously. Jasper nodded and said, that shipyard is a premium asset. I am close to the people in charge in Harbor City. If the shipyard operates well, it can bring in a large sum of profits in 1 year. Even if I don't have the time to manage it, I can sell it for more than $1 billion. A business like that is a no-brainer. I have a friend that's involved in shipbuilding. I've heard that he is currently on the lookout for opportunities to expand his production capacity and is out and about looking for equipment. If you don't intend to operate the shipyard on your own, why don't I help you inquire to see if it can be sold off? Dawson suggested. Jasper's eyes shone in interest. Sure, my main focus is still investing in the internet, real estate, and entertainment industries. Shipbuilding involves high amounts of professional talent, and I don't have the ability to manage the shipyard either. If he proposes a suitable price, I'll sell it to him, he said. Nodding in response, Dawson said, all right, let's eat first. I'll help you inquire about it soon. If he's interested, I'll ask him to come to the province for a meeting with you. After having their meal, Dawson was surprised by Julian's arrival. Wendy explained everything to Dawson, who suggested that Julian should train with his personal bodyguards. Julian wanted to prove himself as well. Hence, he immediately agreed to it after seeing Jasper nod his head. Alas, Jasper's gamble in him was soon shown to have paid off. Julian went against 5 of Dawson's personal bodyguards alone. Not only did he win, but he also defeated them impactfully. Dawson looked upon Julian in admiration. His bodyguards consisted of highly skilled men that he had recruited via reliable sources. They were either ex-special forces or martial arts specialists. Therefore, they were all highly capable men. Let Julian come over to train my bodyguards when he's free, Dawson proposed. Sure, Jasper said with a smile. Julian, I'll leave this to you, he added. Julian grinned widely. No problem, he said. The moon shone in the clear night sky, which was speckled with stars. Jasper was lounging on the balcony of the room on the 2nd floor while reading a book leisurely. Suddenly his phone rang. The call was from Hudson Moore. Hudson's angry voice rang out from the other end of the call when he picked up the phone. Mr. Lane, Senna has gone overboard. They hired hackers to attack our server. We're in big trouble now. What happened? Jasper asked in a heavy tone, a frown forming on his face. He put down his book at once. 2 hours ago, our users suddenly discovered that their connection was severed over a large area. The server was severely jammed, and the portal website completely collapsed. We have confirmed that it was an attack launched by hackers. While listening to Hudson's account of the incident, Jasper walked into the study, turned on the computer, and logged into KK. Like Hudson had described, he could not go online despite having logged in for more than 10 seconds. Not long after, a notification stating that there was a server connection failure appeared. After that, Jasper clicked on TerraZone's portal website. Similarly, the original web page, which was rich in content, had become blank and was now completely devoid of words or pictures. Users are scolding us on discussion forums everywhere. What should we do, Mr. Lane? Hudson asked bitterly. Netizens were still relatively simple-minded back in the year 2000. The battles between internet companies were also not as competitive as they would be in the future. However, due to these exact reasons, the opinions and comments published online reflected the most authentic user experiences. Hudson and the others frequently compiled user reviews from discussion forums because of this. Unfortunately, they were all scolding TerraZone right now. KK kept disconnecting when they wanted to use the software to chat online. They could not log in, and the web page was completely blank as well. Who are the users to blame, if not the? Jasper pondered upon it for a while. What about Zane and the others? He asked. They've gone to the machinery room to carry out emergency maintenance, Hudson said. Maintain the server first, then solve the problem of user disconnection as soon as possible. You guys are the top programming professionals in the country. You should be familiar with the groups of hackers within the country, right? Jasper asked. Zane was once the backbone of the Scarlet Union. However, he quit the group. Nevertheless, a lot of people within the hacking industry know him. Without him here, we might be in a worse situation right now, Hudson replied. In that case, use your connections to get in touch with the relevant people and ask them to help you deal with the attack. We must at least try to resist the attack no matter what. Purchase all the firewalls you need for the machinery room. Don't be afraid of spending money at times like this. Next, issue an announcement to notify users that the server has been hacked and let them know that we promise to resolve it as soon as possible. We must first calm down the users, so write it with a sincere attitude. Should I tell everyone that Senna was the one who launched the attack? Hudson asked, gritting his teeth in anger. Jasper laughed. Hud, have you lost it due to your anger? Do you have any evidence that Senna launched this hacker attack on us? He asked. No, Hudson said in exasperation. Exactly. Senna may be waiting for Terry Zone to mess up. Once you blame Senna for the attack, they will follow up with another step, which will bring much worse consequences. In any case, our first priority is to stabilize the server and shield ourselves against the attack. At the same time, we will have to appease the users. These two things must be carried out concurrently to resolve our problems. We'll talk about how to get back at them after I arrive at Cavern City, Jasper said. All right, I'll wait for you in the office tomorrow then. The next day, Wendy sent Jasper to the airport. Julian followed them as well. Take good care of yourself. Remember not to overwork yourself, Wendy reminded Jasper gently as she helped him straighten his collar. Jasper stared at the beautiful woman before him and chuckled. I realize that you've been acting more and more like a devoted wife and loving mother lately, he said. Wendy glared at Jasper and huffed out, devoted wife and loving mother? You make it seem as if I'm gray and old. You aren't old at all. You'll forever be a goddess in my eyes, Jasper teased Wendy as he reached out to pinch the bridge of her nose. Ah, you're so annoying, Wendy remarked, pursing her lips into a smile as she flicked Jasper's hand off her. Go ahead and build your empire. I'll protect you from behind, she said. Nodding, Jasper squeezed Wendy's hands and said, wait for me. I'll build a huge empire and gift it to you as dowry. Wendy blushed and pulled her hands away immediately. She turned over in embarrassment. What a load of nonsense. Who wants your dowry? I'm not going to bother you anymore. I'm leaving, she said in a flustered, low voice. Wendy then turned around and ran away. Jasper chuckled at the sight of Wendy running away. He greeted Julian, turned around, and walked toward customs. Jasp! Wendy's voice suddenly rang out from behind him. Jasper turned around and was met with the sight of a graceful belle standing in the middle of the crowd. She stared at him affectionately, her gaze reminiscent of brilliant stars shining in the night sky. I'll wait for you to come back. Resisting the urge to turn around and hug her, Jasper nodded earnestly. He then turned around and walked toward the customs. On the plane, Jasper took a light nap. As Jasper's personal bodyguard, Julian sat right beside him. Mr. Lane, you have such a loving relationship with Miss Schuler, Julian said. Jasper opened his eyes and glanced at Julian. He chuckled. You're not that young anymore. Should I ask her to introduce a girl to you? Julian shook his head solemnly. Work is my priority, he replied. True. Since we are men, how can we start a family without first having a stable career? Work hard by my side for the next 2 years. After that, I'll arrange something for you, Jasper said. Julian smiled, but he did not put much thought into his words. In his mind, protecting Jasper was his topmost priority. Everything else was secondary. 2 hours later, the plane landed at Cavern City International Airport. Jack Tanner came to pick them up from the airport. Mr. Lane, you're finally here, Jack said after stepping forward. Jasper could tell that he had spent an all-nighter working with Hudson and the others from his pale and tired complexion. Work is important, but you need to rest as well, he said. Jack laughed and said, I can't help much in terms of technical skills, but it's my responsibility to manage and reassure all the employees. Let's talk in the car. Jasper led the way as they walked out of the airport. After they got into the car, Jasper realized that Jack kept staring at Julian. He's my personal bodyguard, he explained. Jack gasped in realization. He was not surprised. Considering Jasper's net worth and social status, he should have employed a personal bodyguard a long time ago. How's everything at the company right now? Jasper asked. The competition between both parties lasted till 4 in the morning. Although it was extremely tough, we managed to protect our server. However, we took a huge loss this time around. The firewalls we purchased and the server upgrades in the machinery room alone cost millions, Jack replied. Nonetheless, the good news is that both the portal webpage and KK have been restored. This incident impacted us greatly. KK has been disconnected for nearly 13 hours, and the users are still not reassured about the situation. Jasper's expression brightened a little after listening to what he said. He then nodded and said, "Since losses are inevitable, all we can do for now is try our best to minimize it." Soon after, the car arrived at the two-story commercial building that Terry's own had just moved into. Upon entering the building, Jasper was met by the sight of dozens of employees working busily at their respective desks. Terry's own had recruited all of these employees later on, so Jasper did not know any of them. Everyone was loaded with work right now due to the incident. Despite this, the atmosphere was lively as there were frequent exchanges of conversation and movement between desks. Jasper was impressed with the vibrant work atmosphere at Terry's own. "Jack, it seems that you're managing the company pretty well," Jasper joked. "I just proposed a general structure. I can't deny that the founders of Terry's own are all extremely talented. Most of the results should be credited to them," Jack said in a humble manner. Jasper nodded and told him, "You'll have to return to JW Capital in the future. I allocated you here just to assist these startup rookies so that they can familiarize themselves with the management methods of a contemporary company as soon as possible. It seems that everything is progressing well." After that, Jasper opened the door of the meeting room and walked in. Zane and the others were all fast asleep in the meeting room. Logan, in particular, was snoring loudly as he slept. This seemingly unorganized and unrefined team would be known as the core of Terry's Own Incorporated, a world-renowned company in the future. All of it would be made possible because of them. Thinking about this, Jasper reminisced upon the fact that regardless of in the past or the present, their success was definitely meant to be. Everyone pulled an all-nighter yesterday, and they fell asleep not too long ago, Hudson said in a hushed tone after making his way toward Jasper. "Let them rest. Let's talk in your office." After speaking, Jasper walked out of the meeting room with Hudson, Jack, and Cameron, who were all wide awake, following behind him. Although Hudson had the highest-ranking company position in Terry's own, he had the simplest office. His office consisted of a small space separated by wooden boards. There was only a desk, a computer, a bookcase, and a few sofas in the room. Other than that, it was barren. It's a simple room. After all, the company has a lot of expenses right now, Hudson said, sounding slightly embarrassed. He poured a cup of water for Jasper. Jasper chuckled. "That's why I was willing to invest in a lot of you. From your stingy demeanor, I can tell that your future will definitely be bright," he said. Hudson nodded. He was glad that Jasper approved of his mindset. "Although we have persevered through this incident, it was mainly because Senna stopped the attack halfway through. Otherwise, we may not have been able to recover our system even now." There was an overcast expression on Hudson's face. Although he had not slept in more than 30 hours, he did not feel even a hint of fatigue. He was overcome with rage and aggravation. "We're still too weak. We had close to zero resistance against Senna's treacherous means of attack. How are our losses?" Jasper asked. Hudson's expression darkened. "We lost more than $1 million in terms of funds. However, the loss in user count is way more significant. There's been a decline of 1/3 of portal visits," he exclaimed. Jasper nodded. The main priority of internet companies was their user count. A decline in users was way more terrifying than a loss in cash. "That be asterisk star Dane Warren is being too harsh." Cameron Scott huffed in anger. "Senna is now vying against Terry's own, so they must still have plans for us," Jasper said after a momentary pause. Worry filled the others' faces after registering what Jasper said. "To be honest, in terms of technical aspects, I don't know as much as you guys do," Jasper said, shrugging his shoulders in exasperation. "However, I'm pretty skilled in fighting a business war," Jasper added with a chuckle. "Leave this matter to me. I can deal with Senna," he said. Hudson's gaze lit up almost immediately. Just as he was about to say something, his phone rang. After exchanging a few words on the phone, Hudson hung up on the call excitedly. Mr. Lane, our savior is here. If it wasn't for his help last night, we wouldn't have been able to withstand the attack, he told Jasper. Does such a talented person exist? What's his name? Jasper asked in surprise. Theo Wright. Jasper slowly raised his brow after hearing this name. This name belonged to a legendary man. He was the creme de la creme of hackers within the country. He was a godfather-level figure. He was the founder of the Hawk Alliance, one of the top hacker organizations. Under the leadership of this godly figure, the Hawk Alliance would raise their national prestige through their groundbreaking performance in several global hacker battles in the few upcoming years. In several global hacker wars a few years later, the Master of the Eagle Alliance, led by this great god, can be said to have beaten the competition severely. This man was also the only person publicly known to have hacked into the United States military database. Jasper did not expect Hudson to be well acquainted with him. Jasper met Theo Wright in the meeting room. He assumed that a hacker god like him must be someone who was cold and daunting. Nevertheless, Jasper found it nearly impossible to associate the short, plump young man with middle-parted hair that was standing right before him with the most powerful man in the online world, the godfather of hacking. Theo, let me start with the introductions. This is the actual head of our company, Mr. Jasper Lane. This is Mr. Jack Tanner. Hudson introduced Theo to everyone passionately. Theo looked at Jack and smiled. I know you. You used to be a high-level executive at Worsoft, he said. After the both of them shook hands, Theo turned over to look at Jasper. Jasper grinned and extended his hand. You're the #1 hacker in the country. I've admired you for a long time, he said. Theo was actually rather nervous. He was not accustomed to interacting with strangers in real life. Jasper's confident demeanor, which radiated from his actions and behavior, made him feel particularly uneasy. Nice to meet you. I don't dare to claim the title of being the top hacker in the country. Hacking technology consists of extremely profound knowledge. No one would dare to say that they are the best of the best. I'm still learning. Theo's words made everyone burst out into laughter. A successful person must stand out in one way or another. This applied to any field out there. Take Theo as an example, who had an extremely normal appearance. He looked like any other average young man out there and was not particularly good at socializing with strangers. However, his reverence toward technology was enough to prove that he did indeed have the potential and ability to be the top hacker in the country. Hudson and Jasper exchanged a glance. Theo, I have previously told you that we would like you to join our company. You would be in charge of all aspects of network security. What do you think about that? Hudson asked. Theo chuckled in response. He said, Hudson, you know very well that people like us are used to having all the freedom we want. I don't have the intention of joining a company, so... Jasper laughed. You're extremely capable. Do you want to remain as a hacker for your entire life? He asked. Theo raised his head to look at Jasper. A look of distaste flashed across his face. Jasper's choice of words made it seem like he was looking down upon hackers. Jasper did not pay any heed to the expression on Theo's face. He continued speaking. You must know that as laws and regulations gradually improve, even the most highly skilled hackers will start to experience growing restrictions on the internet. It will be impossible for you to continue doing as you wish in such an unscrupulous manner. However, everything will be different if you join TerryZone. With your skills, you can help TerryZone build a protective firewall. During the process, you can also compete against hackers from everywhere around the world. The only thing that would be different is that you're doing everything for a good cause. Don't you want to rely on your skills to become someone respected and admired by those within the hacker industries? Theo's expression changed. Jasper's words had managed to speak to his heart. How do you find TerryZone? Jasper asked, suddenly changing the topic. It's excellent, Theo replied. As one of the top hackers within the country, Theo had an even more precise and professional vision of the internet compared to everyone else. He knew that TerryZone had great potential right now. KK, in particular, had attained massive control of the market. It was truly the top online chatting software in the country. TerryZone's team of founders consists of individuals who are capable of dominating different fields. However, they currently lack a master that's capable of handling cybersecurity issues. Join us. With you on the team, Terry's own will soar to greater heights. Theo laughed at Jasper's sincere words. Since you guys are inviting me so enthusiastically, I can't find any reason to reject this offer, he said. Jasper and Hudson looked at each other and burst out into laughter. However, I have a condition, Theo suddenly announced. You can tell us anything, Hudson said. I have two other friends. They're currently in poor financial conditions and are in urgent need of a job. I would like to bring them into the company so that we can work together. After all, it would be difficult for me if I was to work alone. You can rest assured of their skills. They're extremely competent, Theo said. Hudson chuckled. Since you've recommended them, I'm sure their skills are impeccable. You can ask them to come over. I'll have someone make the relevant arrangements so that you guys can start working as soon as possible, he said. Theo nodded. All right, it's a deal, he said excitedly. It's a deal. With that, Hudson and Theo shook hands enthusiastically. In the office building of the Terra Regional Branch of Colossal Investments located in Cavern City, Dane Warren, the chairman of Senna, and William, the president of the Terra Regional Branch of Colossal Investments, each signed their respective agreements. Dane laughed as both of them shook hands. William, I hope that Colossal Investments can help us achieve our plan of getting publicly listed as soon as possible, he said. William chuckled in return. Now that we've signed a contract, we're even more eager than you are to get Senna publicly listed. We can only cash in our investment and earn money after Senna gets listed, he said. Dane snickered and said, I'm in urgent need of funds to acquire Terry's own as well. During this period of time, I have been carrying out the relevant preparations required for the acquisition of Terry's own. William shrugged. Warren, I don't actually understand why you're being so insistent on taking down Terry's own. You need to know that Senna's public listing is our top priority right now, he said. Dane laughed. There's something you don't know. Senna's public listing is already set in stone. However, Senna is merely one of the 4 major internet portals right now. What would happen if I also acquired Terry's own and managed to get my hands on the largest online chatting software in the domestic market? He explained. William's gaze perked up in interest when he heard this. There will definitely be a major spike in Senna's stock price, he said. Dane grinned in satisfaction. That's right. One of the reasons I intend to do so is to get back at Terry's own for defeating Senna Chat with their platform, but this is a relatively minor point. My true goal is to acquire their company after defeating them, he said. You're indeed the best internet merchant in your country, Warren. William praised him. Chuckling, Dane replied, those few young men are still way too inexperienced and naive to found a startup company. They don't know anything about the harshness of the business world. It's only natural for them to experience such an outcome. William asked his secretary to open a bottle of champagne. Handing a flute of champagne to Dane, William raised his glass and made a toast. To your wealth and prosperity, he said. Dane and William clinked their glasses together. To our wealth and prosperity, they laughed while making a toast. Half an hour later, below the office building, Dane narrowed his eyes and looked at the magnificent office building. He snorted coldly, seeming extremely unhappy. Mr. Warren, you don't seem too happy. Isn't it a good thing that the contract has been signed? His secretary walked forward and asked him. Dane's expression darkened. These people are vampires. They want to acquire 25% of Senna's shares in exchange for helping us list the company on the NASDAQ. They're scoring a huge bargain. His secretary shrunk into himself. He did not dare to interrupt Dane when he was talking about important affairs. Mr. Warren, are we going back right now? He asked cautiously. Go back? Since we're already in Cavern City, we can't miss out on the opportunity to pay a visit to our former competitor, Dane said. His lips twisted into a cold sneer as he ordered, let's head to Terry's own. Everyone in Terry's own received the news about Dane Warren's visit immediately. Hudson and Logan were sitting in the meeting room with troubled looks on their faces while Jasper stood by the side. Jasper looked at the solemn expressions on their faces and let out an inward laugh. It seemed as if they were preparing for a battle. Relax, guys. Dane Warren is just paying us a visit. Do you guys intend to beat him up once you see him? He asked. Zane and the others are still in the operations room. If they were here, they may really beat up Warren, Logan said in distaste. Hudson glared at Logan. Can the problem be resolved through fighting? We are businessmen now. We should focus on business alone. Everyone will treat us as a joke if we start a brawl, he said in annoyance. Logan scratched his head and huffed in anger. I simply can't get over it. How dare he greet us and tell us that he's coming over to get acquainted with us? Acquaintance, my asterisk SS? Why is he acting so courteously toward us? Don't we all know that he's the one who brought all this sh*t upon us? Those in the business world have their own way of solving problems. Being expressive of your emotions will only allow people see through you at a glance. As Hudson said, everyone here is an adult. Don't act in a childish manner, Jasper said in a calm and controlled tone. Logan nodded and fell quiet after hearing what Jasper said. Not long after, the door to the meeting room opened and Dane Warren walked in with his secretary following closely behind. No matter how unhappy Hudson was, Dane Warren was still paying a visit to his company as the chairman of Senna. As the host, he had to accommodate him out of common courtesy. Therefore, Hudson stood up and plastered a smile onto his face. He then walked toward Dane Warren. You took time out of your busy schedule to visit us, Mr. Warren. It's a huge honor, Hudson remarked politely in a relatively neutral tone. Dane burst out into laughter. He had a booming voice and hearty laughter. One who did not understand him would have thought that he was a bold and simple-minded man. However, under the facade of his honest and straightforward persona, he was a vicious man with an extremely cruel heart. You're being way too courteous, Mr. Moore. I had to attend a public meeting surrounding the internet industry in Cavern City, so I stopped by your office to look around, Dane said as he clasped Hudson's hand in a tight grip. Right? Didn't you get invited to the meeting, Mr. Moore? Dane asked while feigning doubt and uncertainty. Hudson's face stiffened. He drew back his hand and said matter-of-factly, there has been a lot of company affairs lately. You should understand, Mr. Warren. That's why I wasn't free. Dane could not help but sneer in his heart upon noticing the somber gaze in Hudson's eyes. Alas, these young people were way too inexperienced. They could hardly hold it in after receiving a few taunts. Scanning through the crowd, Dane side-eyed Logan before finally setting his eyes on Jasper. And this is? Jasper stood up lightheartedly. With a calm demeanor, he gently extended his hand. I'm Jasper Lane, the president of JW Capital, he said. JW Capital. Dane's heart lurched. He glanced at Jasper in amusement. If he wanted to acquire Terryzone, JW Capital, who owned more than half of Terryzone stocks, would be an inevitable hurdle. Mr. Lane, I've heard all about you, Dane said as he extended his hand toward Jasper. A smile that did not reach his eyes formed across his lips. Jasper shook his hand and chuckled. You have an extremely well-known reputation, Mr. Warren. Juniors like us have a lot that we can learn from you, he said. Dane laughed at his choice of words, which reflected the bare minimum of politeness. Despite this, he did not mind at all. From his perspective, Terryzone had already lost. Losers would inevitably hold some grievances after the battle. Their insinuating words were more like a compliment to him. Only winners deserved to accept a loser's derision and mockery. Was it not? Dane took a seat on the chair in a calm and collected manner. I heard that Terryzone faced quite a number of difficulties over these 2 days, he said cheerily. Logan clenched his hands in a fist upon hearing what he said. He could hardly stop himself from aiming a blow straight at Dane's head. Everyone already knew that the problems faced by Terryzone were caused by Dane himself. Nonetheless, he still came over to feign compassion and gloat about it in front of them. Without paying any heed to Logan's fuming gaze, Dane continued speaking. You guys are still young. You have no idea how ruthless the business sector can be. Operating a business isn't an easy feat as your senior. I would like to give you guys a reminder. It's important to quit while you're ahead, he said. Hudson sat down and stared at Dane impassively. Mr. Warren, if you have anything you want to tell us, just say it to us directly. Young people like us don't have much experience, and I'm afraid we don't quite understand what you're trying to imply, he said. Dane chortled gleefully. In that case, I'll just say it directly. Dane then beckoned his secretary over. His secretary immediately took out a document from his briefcase. Dane waved the document in front of them and announced, since Terryzone is facing so many hardships, I'm here today to lend a helping hand. Senna would like to acquire Terryzone. After hearing what he said, Logan could not contain himself anymore. What bullshit are you going on about? Warren, you were the one who stirred up all these problems in the first place. And now you're saying that you want to acquire our company. What do you take us for? Let me tell you, there's no way that that'll happen. Dane sneered. Young man, first of all, I don't understand what you mean by stirring up problems. I have never done anything to Terry's own. The hardships that you're facing are all due to your own incapability, he said. On the other hand, a wise man submits to his circumstances. Terry's own is barely surviving right now. Is there still a need to continue struggling? Senna is giving you a way out by acquiring the company. Hudson glared at Dane. He was trying his best to control his fury. We reject your acquisition. If this is the only thing you're here for, please leave. We won't see you on your way out, he said stiffly. Dane's expression darkened. Appreciate my act of kindness while I'm still offering it graciously. How long can Terry's own persist under such circumstances? He asked icily. As the leading portal among the 4 major portals, Senna has reached an agreement with Colossal Investments and is about to get listed. Once Senna becomes a public listed company, we will have a market value of at least several billion US. Dane then narrowed his eyes at Hudson. He continued rambling on haughtily. What about Terry's own? God knows when you guys will be able to get Terry's own listed. If Senna wanted to crush you guys, it would be easier than stomping an ant to death. I'm giving you guys a chance right now, so you'd better appreciate my kindness. Once Senna gets listed, I won't bother to look your way even if you guys stand before me asking for help. After speaking, Dane looked at Hudson with a proud, overbearing gaze. He believed that anyone with a decent head on his shoulder would carefully consider what he had said. Mr. Warren, Jasper interjected abruptly. The calm tone attracted Dane's attention. You've been talking for a long time, but I'm curious. How much do you intend to acquire Terry's own for? Dane chuckled in response to Jasper's question. You're a smart person, Mr. Lane. It's no wonder that you have such a precise vision and decided to invest in Terry's own so early in advance, he said. Senna has prepared $20 million for a full acquisition of Terry's own. After that, Dane threw the agreement on the table. He seemed pretty full of himself. It was the year 2000. How many millionaires were there in the country? $20 million was a monumental price for the acquisition of a company like Terry's own. It meant that these few young men were about to become millionaires. Jasper had previously invested $10 million into Terry's own in return for 51% of the company's stocks. This incident had largely boosted Terry's own's reputation. This was no secret. Dane figured that Jasper could completely withdraw his investment within a few months. This deal was evidently a huge bargain. $20 million is a large sum of money, Jasper said, letting out an inward laugh. Dane snickered. Young man, you need to understand the circumstances that Terry's own is currently facing. If you continue operating the company like this, how long can Terry's own survive? It may even go bankrupt tomorrow, he said contemptuously. When that day comes, your $10 million will vanish into thin air. However, you can still withdraw your full investment right now. Shouldn't you thank me for giving you this excellent opportunity? He asked. Jasper sighed. My apologies, Mr. Warren. I'm someone who doesn't act until I see the incentives. I'd rather lose everything than settle for a compromise, he said. It's just $10 million. I can afford to lose that much. Dane's expression darkened after hearing Jasper's words. Jasper Lane, how dare you turn a blind eye to my good intentions? I will gladly turn a blind eye to your good intentions. All of a sudden, Jasper stood up and placed both of his hands on the meeting table. He leaned forward and pinned a predatory gaze upon Dane. I'll address you by your name if I want to show my respect to you as a senior in the industry. However, if I look down upon you, you're nothing in my eyes. He articulated each of his words clearly. Quit acting almighty because of your experience in the industry. I don't care about those 2 measly steel bars of yours. How dare you come over to Terry's own and appear before me to tell me that you want to acquire Terry's own? Aren't you afraid of biting off more than you can chew? Bang! A loud slam resonated through the room. Incandescent with rage, Dane slammed his palm onto the surface of the meeting table. Jasper Lane, are you challenging me? He yelled. Jasper let out a soft laugh as he stood upright. You'll know very soon if I'm challenging you or not, he said indifferently. Logan, who was right beside Jasper, stared at him in awe. He retracted his gaze from Dane, who was consumed with rage, and turned to look at Jasper. His admiration for him instantly soared. Damn, he was standing up for the company like a real man. Dane looked at Hudson with an icy gaze. Hudson Moore, is this how you guys do things in Terry's Zone? He asked in a low voice. Hudson shrugged nonchalantly and said, You'll have to excuse us. Mr. Lane is the controlling shareholder of Terry's Zone. He will be the chairman of the board of directors once the board is established in the future. Therefore, his words represent the will of Terry's Zone. Well. Very well. Dane was so infuriated that he insistently repeated the same words. He raised his hand and pointed at Jasper. You guys will eventually submit to us, even after rejecting my good intentions. He shouted angrily. Jasper arched his brow slightly. Will you be the one submitting to us, or will we be the one submitting to you? He questioned. Dane scoffed. Young man, don't think that you can act so recklessly just because you have some money. You're a lowly junior in the internet industry. How dare you challenge me? I've said everything that I've wanted to say today. I'm showing you guys a sign of respect by acquiring Terry's Zone. However, since you guys refuse to be respected, you'll bear all the consequences on your own. This goes for you as well, Jasper Lane. All you have is an investment company. How great do you think you are? I'm sorry, but you're not worth *T in front of Senna. Jasper narrowed his eyes at Dane. He then took up the document on the table and tore it into pieces. Pieces of paper billowed through the air. Mr. Warren, small transactions like this don't catch my eyes. Why don't I add another zero behind the 20 million? Shall I acquire Senna for $200 million? Dane cackled maniacally. Acquire Senna? Haha. You're being way too full of yourself. Why don't you look at yourself before talking big like this? What do you take Senna for? Senna is the largest website portal in the country. Do you think you can acquire it just because you want it? Mr. Warren, don't look down on the younger generation. Let's wait and see what happens. Jasper said in a frigid tone. An overcast expression formed on Dane's face. He looked like he wanted to devour them alive. Your sharp tongue is not something to be proud of. You guys are smiling happily now, but I'll make sure that you won't be able to cry even if you wanted to in a few days' time, Dane said. Mr. Warren, we still don't know for sure who'll be the one crying then. What goes around comes around. The time for you to cry will come on the day I show up before you to acquire Senna, Jasper said calmly. The expression on Dane's face morphed into one of all-consuming rage. He glared at Jasper and shouted, It seems that you'll only submit under force. Just wait and see. Dane stormed off angrily after saying this. After Dane left in a state of fury, Hudson looked at Jasper and smiled bitterly. What shall we do now, Mr. Lane? There's no rush. Let's just do what we need to do, Jasper said calmly. It's just Dane Warren. He can't raise hell upon us. Mr. Lane, what you said just now was so cool. Logan exclaimed in excitement while staring at Jasper. Jasper chuckled. Although Terry's Zone is indeed below Senna right now, we shouldn't just take his insults since he took it this far. We must talk back and defend ourselves when we need to, he replied. Hudson nodded, seemingly lost in thought. Right then, Dane made his way out of Terry's Zone with a dark expression on his face. He roared out in anger. They're being way too much. How dare this bunch of shameless *starts treat me like that? Dane's secretary trembled in shock as he stared at him. The secretary stood by the side, not daring to utter a single word. Dane panted loudly. A venomous glint flashed across his eyes as he turned around to gaze at Terry's Zone's office building. He then pulled out his phone with a sneer on his face. The call went through soon after. It's me, Dane Warren. A courteous voice spoke on the other end of the phone. Mr. Warren, how can I help you? Launch a second attack on Terry's Zone right now. Let them get a taste of despair through this attack. Do everything that you can. It'd be best if you could defeat them all in one go. Dane growled. How dare this bunch of jokers stand up against me? I'll teach them how to behave today. The person on the other end of the phone was evidently stupefied for a moment. However, there was no delay in his reply. All right, Mr. Warren. "We will do exactly as you wish," he replied immediately. Hanging up the phone call, Dane grinned. He then bent down and got into the car. Back in Cavern City, Jasper, Hudson, and the others had just returned to the company after having their meals. Although Zane and the others had pulled an all-nighter, they were still young. Hence, they sprung back into action after getting a few hours of sleep. Hudson brought up the issue of their funds during the meeting. After moving to a new building and hiring so many employees in addition to the server bandwidth expenses, they had been spending hundreds of thousands on a daily basis. Furthermore, they had upgraded their server and bandwidth after the attack the night before. Another $1 million had been spent on that. Therefore, they had less than $10 million left right now. "If you don't have sufficient funds, I can invest a bit more. We need to go up against Senna right now," Jasper said. The meeting room fell pin-drop silent after he spoke. Jack spoke up as well. "I've got a grasp of Dane Warren's personality back when I was working at Warsoft. He's extremely good at doing business, but his biggest specialty is his cruelty. His cold-hearted methods and unscrupulous way of handling affairs was a major contributor to the rise of Senna. During the early days of Senna's development, a lot of his competitors were defeated by him through disreputable means, so he had a pretty poor reputation. What should we do?" Logan asked worriedly. Jasper looked at Theo and said, "We will need your help, Theo." Theo had a solemn expression on his face. "Since I've already joined Terry's Zone, I will do everything I can to the best of my abilities," he said. Jasper nodded and said, "We can't let our guard down during these next 2 days. Senna could launch their attack on us at any time. We must be sufficiently prepared this time around." "Sure." After agreeing to Jasper's instructions, everyone left the meeting room to work on their respective tasks. Only Jasper, who was consumed by his thoughts, remained in the room. Senna was a bomb that would eventually blow up in their faces one day if they did not get rid of it. Terry's Zone was still too vulnerable right now. It would not stand a chance against any harsh blows. If this problem was not resolved as soon as possible, Terry's Zone's future development may be severely delayed. In his past life, Senna rushed to obtain a public listing due to a major shortage of liquidity. Senna had now delayed its listing for such a long time. Furthermore, the internet economy bubble had burst, making it even more difficult for Dane Warren to obtain investments within the country. Therefore, Senna should be short of funds as well. However, Jasper knew very well that the progress of Senna's public listing would not come to a standstill. On the contrary, it would be fast-forwarded instead. Jasper called Jack over after thinking about how Senna succeeded in obtaining a public listing through its connections with Colossal Investments. "Jack, do you know anyone from Colossal Investments?" Jasper asked. Jack was momentarily stunned. He then nodded and said, "I know William, the president of the Terra Regional Branch. We don't know each other very well, but Celine Maynard, the general manager, was my classmate. She's also from Harbor City, so we're quite closely acquainted." Celine Maynard. Jasper knew this name very well. In his past life, he had also been involved in the financial industry. Therefore, he had been greatly influenced by the Queen of Investment, who was widely renowned within the global financial circle. According to the timeline, she should have just gotten married right now. At the same time, she had just taken up the position of general manager of the Terra Regional Branch of Colossal Investments. For years later, she would advance further up the hierarchy and become the president. When Jasper got reborn, the Queen of Investment had gotten promoted to the position of executive chairwoman at Colossal Investments. "Sure. Can you make an appointment with her for me?" Jasper asked. Jack nodded and said, "All right, wait for a while. I'll contact her through a phone call." A few minutes later, Jack returned. "She happens to be in Cavern City for a business trip right now. She will be returning to Harbor City tomorrow afternoon. She said that she's free to meet up with you anytime," he said. Acting decisively, Jasper stood up and said, "Give me the address." Jack told him the address of a hotel, then proceeded to ask him curiously, "Mr. Lane, may I ask if you know her?" "If I knew her, why would I bother to ask you to help me set up an appointment?" Jasper asked in amusement. Jack thought that this reply made sense. "Initially, I told her that you would like to meet her, but she didn't agree. This is expected because, as you know, a company like Colossal Investments with a large-scale business tends to be haughtier and more arrogant. However, she immediately agreed to meet up with you once I told her your name and that you own JW Capital, he said. Jasper did not find this surprising. If Colossal Investments, which ranked the highest among the top 4 investment banks, did not know anything about what he had done in Harbor City, they ought to just close down. Maybe she managed to sense my domineering stance through my name alone, Jasper joked. Silently, Jack watched Jasper leave the company in a hurry. The hotel that Celine Maynard was staying in was quite a distance away. Jasper received a call from Hudson while he was still on the way there. You guessed correctly, Mr. Lane. Senna has launched their second attack on us, Hudson said in a heavy tone. I'm on the move right now. Hold on over there. Make sure what happened yesterday doesn't repeat itself, Jasper said calmly. Understood, Hudson said with a nod. Hudson, what did Mr. Lane say? Logan, who had an overcast expression on his face, immediately asked Hudson once he put down the phone. Mr. Lane wants us to persevere through it to the best of our abilities. He has begun taking action over there. He won't allow Senna to continue acting so recklessly, Hudson said. F***ck it. Dane Warren is such a B***starred. We're all operating our own respective businesses. He's just messing with us just because he's more experienced and owns a larger company than us. Logan yelled angrily. Logan's words represented everyone else's innermost thoughts. Hudson's gaze deepened as he voiced out. Weakness is not an excuse. This is a lesson that each and every one of us must remember. The more aggressive Senna and Dane Warren are, the more we have to bear it and protect ourselves. The day will come when we'll grow bigger and stronger than them. When that day comes, everyone will look highly upon us. Cavern City Ritz-Carlton Hotel. As one of the top global 5-star hotel brands, the Ritz-Carlton in Cavern City was the second branch of the flagship hotel in the country after it first opened in Andros. Needless to say, this was the most luxurious hotel in the whole of Cavern City right now. No other hotel could top the degree of luxury it provided. Following the address Jack gave him, Jasper went straight to the highest floor of the hotel. The presidential suite was located on this floor. A woman dressed in a business suit was standing by the door once he got out of the elevator. May I know if you're Mr. Lane? The woman, who resembled a secretary, asked him courteously. Jasper nodded. Please follow me, the secretary said while gesturing at him to follow her. She led the way in front of him. Miss Maynard is in the midst of a video conference right now. There was a last-minute decision to hold the conference, so we did not have the time to notify you, Mr. Lane, she explained while walking. It's all right. I can wait for a while, Jasper said. The secretary brought Jasper into the suite. After arriving at a reception room, she prepared some tea and left the room. The presidential suite of this hotel had a master bedroom and a minimum of 2 other guest bedrooms in addition to a lounge, meeting room, reception room, and a study. It was fully equipped with a wide range of facilities. Even the reception room that Jasper was currently situated in was about 70 to 80 square meters in size. After waiting in the reception room for almost an hour, the door suddenly opened. A pretty, tall, and slender woman that gave off an air of competency walked into the reception room. Celine headed straight toward Jasper after entering the room. She extended her hand with an apologetic smile plastered on her face. I'm really sorry, Mr. Lane. There was a last-minute emergency meeting, so it took quite some time. You must have waited for a long time, she said. I'm the one who's disturbing you. I should be the one apologizing instead, Jasper said politely as he shook hands with Celine. The two of them then sat down. Celine's secretary came forward and placed a cup of tea in front of each of them. After that, she sat down in a corner of the room and remained silent. Meanwhile, Celine and Jasper quietly sized each other up. She was indeed the same queen of investment that he had seen on a magazine cover in his past life. However, her aura had yet to grow to the same level of sophistication as it was in his past life. At the moment, Celine Maynard emanated a sense of competency and dominance that could not be compared to her future self. She had long been complacent and comfortable with her position in her future days. Thus, she did not shine as brilliantly as she did right now. In other words, once a woman concealed their ambitious demeanor, it would not be discovered easily. Nevertheless, that meant that she even more dangerous. At the same time, Selena was observing Jasper. Like most of the people who were meeting him the first time, her first reaction to Jasper was shock at his young age. At an age like this, Celine could hardly associate him with the powerful figure who had dominated Harbor City. As the general manager of the Terra regional branch of Colossal Investments, Celine knew very well about the incident whereby the Harbor City stock market had gotten attacked by Western capital during the crisis of the bursting economic bubble some time ago. She even knew that Quantum Fund was the one behind all of it. This young man before her was the one who had presided over Harbor City's $100 billion rescue plan. Not everyone had the ability to do something like that. Not only did he handle it, but he also did an amazing job at that. Besides that, Celine also knew that this young man shared an extremely close relationship with the top 4 families of Harbor City. He was especially close with the laws. Even the Harbor City government took a great liking to Jasper as he had played a decisive role in this economic defense battle. If it had not been for these glorious achievements, Celine would not have decided to meet the mere chairman of a local investment company. Mr. Lane, Jack is a longtime friend of mine. He told me that you wanted to meet up with me because of an urgent matter. May I know what this matter is regarding? Celine spoke up first. Jasper pondered for a while before deciding to go straight to the point. I know that Senna is planning to get listed on the Nasdaq. Did they ask Colossal Investments to be their agent? He asked straightforwardly. Celine was stunned. How did you know that, Mr. Lane? Yes, they have. Not many people know about this. Furthermore, Mr. William, the regional president, is handling this personally, she answered in surprise. Mr. William was the one who had called for an emergency video conference just now. The main topic of discussion was Senna's public listing. Once the listing plan for Senna gets launched, it would become the Terra regional branch's largest business deal of the year. They would gain a lucrative sum of profits from handling this. William, who was eager to present his achievements to the headquarters, placed a great deal of emphasis on this issue. Therefore, the conference just now was mainly centered on the arrangements required to help Senna obtain a public listing as soon as possible. Furthermore, this plan had only been circulated among the top executives of the Terra regional branch of Colossal Investments who had participated in the video conference earlier. How did Jasper Lane know about it? Jasper chuckled lightly. I have my ways. I came over today in hopes that you'd be able to work together with me, Miss Maynard, he said. Celine shook her head after listening to what he said. My apologies, but I can't help you with this. Mr. William is handling this issue personally, and no one else is allowed to interfere in his plans. Besides, both parties have already signed a contract. Why are you suggesting that we should work together, Mr. Lane? She asked. Jasper directed a scorching gaze at Celine. I don't want Senna to obtain a public listing. After registering his words, Celine's expression immediately changed. She looked at Jasper with a frown as she wondered what were the true intentions behind his words. Jasper looked straight into Celine's eyes. Miss Maynard, you don't really want to see Senna obtain a public listing, right? He asked this in a playful tone. I don't understand what you're implying here, Mr. Lane. The public listing of Senna is the Terra regional branch's largest deal of the year. There's no reason for me to sabotage this deal, Celine said in a cutting tone. Indeed, it is the largest bit of business for the Terra regional branch of Colossal Investments this year. However, this has nothing to do with you. Am I right, Miss Maynard? Jasper's words caused Celine to fall silent. They were both intelligent people. There was no need to squabble over a trivial matter like this. Although Celine was extremely competent, she had just taken up this mantle. She arrived at her current position after going through many exchanges of interests and cruel battles. Hence, both her opponents and those in support of her were all waiting to see how she would perform in this position. Evidently, William was not one of those who supported her. The responsibilities of the president and general manager both overlapped greatly, which meant that their individual capabilities would determine the one between them who would emerge as the boss. William would not remain dormant while watching Celine grab all the power from his hands. Therefore, Celine had not been involved in Senna's listing at all. Once the plan succeeds, it would be difficult for Celine, who did not have access to many resources in the Terra regional branch, to surpass the deal and soar toward greater heights. Jasper took a sip from his cup of tea. Miss Maynard, You need to preserve the right to speak for the Terra Regional Branch in order to retain the dignity and authority befitting of a general manager. Meanwhile, I don't want Senna to get listed. Therefore, we share common interests, he said with a smile. Celine pinned a deep and thoughtful gaze on Jasper. She was rather taken aback. What was the background of this young man, and why did he know so much about the internal strife for power within the Terra Regional Branch of Colossal Investments? How could each and every of his words resonate with all of her heartfelt thoughts? Even if Celine was smart, she did not expect that Jasper had been rebirthed with more than 20 years' worth of memories. In her past life, when Celine had climbed the corporate ladder abruptly, people had dug up some secrets about her. One of the most well-known secrets was how she changed jobs from Cephas Securities to Colossal Investments as a young newbie and then immediately jumped into the position of the general manager in the Terra region. Then, there was the story of how she fought for power with the current president in the Terra region, William, as a general manager. This later became Celine's entry point. Celine looked at Jasper calmly and said, "Mr. Lane, what are you planning to do? How do you want me to work with you?" Jasper smiled and said, "First, I hope to know what price Senna had to pay for you to be their agent." Celine furrowed her brows and said bluntly, "Mr. Lane, you should know that before the listing succeeds, that this is a trade secret. If I leak this, I'll face the risk of getting sued." Jasper held up his hands and said, "There are no risks in this world that you can't handle, right? Power is always obtained from battles that are full of risks, and never given to you by the enemies out of pity." Celine stayed silent for a while before saying indifferently, "Senna is willing to give us 25% of their stocks in exchange for Colossal Investments to help them get listed on the Nasdaq. How generous." When Jasper heard this price, even he silently praised Dane's decisiveness. How much was 25% of the total shares worth? This would take away a quarter of Senna's value. Even though they would need to pay a huge price, in the face of Senna's capital chain rupture crisis, it was a necessary step. After all, you could not make an omelet without breaking a few eggs. If Senna wanted to get through this crisis and start anew, they would need to give up on short-term benefits. Ordinary people would not be able to do this. It was through bold moves like that Dane was able to make Senna into the most outstanding web portal in the country. No mediocre leader would be able to get to this position. "Miss Maynard, will you work with me to take down this 25% figure from your investment company?" Jasper asked indifferently. Celine's expression changed immediately. Jasper was saying that he wanted her to steal from her own company. This was not as simple as leaking a trade secret now. Before she could say anything, the secretary who had been staying silent this entire time stood up to speak. "Impossible!" The secretary's tone was stern. "Miss Maynard, you can't promise him this. This is impossible. The company is planning to help Senna get listed. We can't transfer the shares away. You won't be able to get past William on this matter. More importantly, so what if he gets the shares? Senna won't be publicly listed, and they'll end up suing us. When that happens, we'll be in trouble. This person is harboring evil intentions. Who knows what's the purpose behind him coming here?" The secretary's words caused Celine's face to darken. She did not say anything. A secretary was interrupting the conversation of their superiors, but was not immediately berated. This meant that her boss was carefully considering her words. Jasper's expression looked calm and tranquil. He ignored the secretary's overbearing attitude and was only looking at Celine. "Mr. Lane, Miss Stone came here with me from Cephas Securities, and she's been working with me for 6 years. At work, she's my secretary, but in my daily life, she's my best friend. Therefore, her words are equal to mine." Celine had a calm look on her face. The implication was that she had already rejected Jasper. 150 million, Jasper suddenly said. "Colossal Investments wants Senna's stocks because you hope it might grow in the future. Despite this, I am currently offering to pay you 150 million on the spot in exchange for 25% of the stock. For an investment company like you guys, this is a deal that is a win for you any way you look at it." Celine replied without any expression on her face, "Mr. Lane, I don't think you understand. For our investment company, the most important thing is trust. Since we've already signed an agreement with Senna, we'll do things according to the agreement. If that's the case, What if Senna is destined to never be listed? Even though Dane is the chairman of Senna, he might not be the biggest shareholder, said Jasper insipidly. In order to get more investment, Senna kept diluting and issuing stocks over the years. 3 investment companies in the country held a total of 34% of Senna's stocks at the time, and that 34% are in my hands now. Jasper laced his fingers together and looked at Celine and Miss Stone, whose expressions had changed abruptly. Then he said calmly, "A company will only go public after gaining approval from 2/3 of all of the shareholders. I already own over 34% of the shares, so I have the sole power to decide if we go public or not. If I disagree, what will Colossal Investments use to list the company? The decision alone from the internal shareholders of Senna will not be sufficient to save the deal in this situation. Is Dane going to use his head to try to get listed on the Nasdaq?" Jasper's words felt like a clap of thunder. It was so shocking that Celine and Miss Stone started to breathe heavier. How is that possible? We did a background check, but we didn't learn anything about this. Moreover, does Dane not know about this? Miss Stone muttered. Jasper replied calmly, "I am deliberately scheming against Dane, so why would I let him know? As for your background check, to be honest, you still need to strengthen your information network in the country." Celine looked heatedly at Jasper and said, "If that's the case, then the contract William signed with Senna has major issues. I need to report to the headquarters now." Jasper said casually, "While you're at it, tell your boss that you're only going to make them a profit from this $150 million deal." "Please wait for my update, Mr. Lane," Celine said. Jasper smiled and replied indifferently, "I've been babbling for too long, so I should take my leave now." Miss Stone watched as Jasper left. Then, she could not control herself and asked Celine, "Miss Maynard, can we trust him?" Celine sighed deeply. "If this were someone else, I would not believe them, but he hosted a market rescue of hundreds of billions in Harbor City and has a good relationship with the laws. Even the government of Harbor City admires him, so I don't think he has a need to lie to us. In that case, what are we going to do?" Miss Stone said in a pall. "I think we should ask the headquarters in Wall Street to start a shareholder meeting to talk about this," Celine sighed. "What does Jasper want from doing all this? Even if he's all that, it was all done in Harbor City. Our country is not like Harbor City, yet he thinks he can defeat Dane? I don't believe him," Miss Stone spat coldly. Celine looked fixedly at her and said, "We don't have any business in his gripe with Dane. Now, I need to immediately report this to the higher-ups." Miss Stone huffed and was looking down on Jasper's personality. She felt that he was a vile character who would backstab others at a moment's notice. What big accomplishment could this despicable vermin achieve? She scoffed. Miss Stone was suddenly looking forward to this. She could not wait to see Jasper suffer a crushing defeat at Dane's hands, even after doing so much and spending so much money. At this moment, Jasper had just walked out of the hotel as he called Jack. "Jack, contact the person in charge of ManhwaCapped. Tell them I want to buy their 34% stake in Senna. If they don't agree, tell them I've already gotten 25% ownership of Senna from Colossal Investments." After going back to Terry's own, Hudson and the rest were not back yet. Inside the office, Jasper and Jack were sitting next to each other. "I've contacted ManhwaCapped, and they want to confirm whether you've really gotten Colossal Investments 25% of the shares, Mr. Lane." After he heard what Jack said, Jasper smiled and said, "You want to know too, right, Jack?" Jack chortled and said, "I think it's true. If this was someone else, I won't believe them, but if it's you, there's a possibility. You think so highly of me." Jasper shrugged. He was not a god, so he could not make everything go his way. Basically, the plan this time was to use the misinformation between ManhwaCapped and Colossal Investments to create a chance to gain some advantages. Jasper told Colossal Investments that he had ManhwaCapped's 34% of the shares. He was using this to threaten them, to make them realize that if they did not nod their heads, Senna would not be able to float in the market. As such, they would definitely sell their shares. As it was Senna's internal problem that caused their float to fail, according to the agreement, Colossal Investments would automatically get 25% shares as compensation. On the other hand, Jasper could use the fact that he got Colossal Investment shares as a requirement to buy the shares ManhwaCapped had. Montaigne Capitals would not have a reason to decline that as well. After Jack heard what Jasper said, he widened his eyes and said in disbelief, "You're saying that you're lying to them?" Jasper smiled and said, "I'm not lying because I'm this close to getting my hands on colossal investment share of Senna's shares, and it is indeed 25%. Jasper told Jack about his plan. Jack was dazed and dizzy after he heard it. "To be honest, I'm so impressed with you," Jack said sincerely. "These are just cheap tricks. The main problem is that we're still not strong enough. If not, we wouldn't have to use such cheap tricks and could just crush them brazenly," Jasper lamented. Jack said, "You're still young and have a long future ahead. In a few more years, you'll be able to reach the height you mentioned. To be honest, I have no idea where you'll be in the future, but it must be a height that other people can only look up to. How should I reply to Montaigne Capitals then?" Jack asked. Jasper hesitated for a while before saying, "Did they quote a price?" Jack said, "They did. 200 million. They only invested 80 million back then, right? It's just been 2 years and they're selling it for 200 million. What great business people," Jasper said dully. Jack laughed and said, "There's still a very large chance with this price." Jasper shook his head and said, "No, we don't need to negotiate the price. Just promise them. The requirement is to deal immediately." Jack was stumped for words. He could not help but say, "We could at least get it down to 180 million. Jack, we don't have any stocks with us. If this drags on, problems will arise," Jasper said with a smile. "The most important thing is that I can double this 200 million very soon. Everyone underestimates that Senna still has the value of Terry's own. If I combine these two companies into one, who else would become the king of the internet in this country?" Jack stopped speaking abruptly and looked at Jasper while overwhelmed with shock. He muttered, "If that's the case, Terry's own could skyrocket. It would be immeasurably valuable to be #1 in the country's internet industry. That's why I'm asking you to talk to them about this for me." "Go as soon as you can," Jasper said. Jack got up and said seriously, "All right, I'll get to the airport now and talk to the people from the headquarters of Montaigne Capitals. I'll do my best to close this deal. Thank you for your hard work." Jasper patted Jack's shoulders. Jack smiled and said, "I'm included in the vesting. The more the company earns, the more I'll get, so this is not hard work at all." "Indeed," Jasper said with a loud laugh. "Sometimes, actual benefits would be more trustworthy than relationships and feelings." Colossal Investments was an investment company that was top in the world and could be said to be very efficient. Jasper received a call from Celine that night. An hour later, the sky turned black and Jasper once again came to Ritz-Carlton Hotel. This time, Celine was standing at the door to wait for Jasper unlike in the morning. "Mr. Lane, we meet again," said Celine as she reached out her hand to shake Jasper's. Jasper smiled and shook Celine's hand. He said, "Is there a conclusion?" Celine nodded and said, "Actually, the higher-ups are moved by Mr. Lane's suggestion, because to us, gratuitously making 150 million just by reselling our stocks and agreement would be like finding money on the streets." Jasper and Celine walked into the hotel shoulder to shoulder. After Jasper heard that, he laughed and said, "Under normal circumstances, this would be followed by bad news, Miss Maynard." Celine looked at Jasper in surprise. She said, "Mr. Lane, do you know how to read minds?" "I'm just very observant," Jasper smiled and said. Celine pondered for a while and then said, "Just as you expected, Mr. Lane, Mr. William is very opinionated about this plan. He thought we should investigate this properly. Even if we're violating an agreement, we can only talk about this after we let Senna violate it first. His reason being that as long as Senna can float successfully, then the profit Senna will bring to Colossal Investments might be much more than 150 million. Jasper nodded and said, "Things will be as he said. After all, if Senna floats successfully, the shares of 25% would definitely be more than 150 million. What do the higher-ups think then?" Celine's expression looked solemn. She looked at Jasper and said, "I've already convinced the higher-ups, but Mr. Lane, I want to know how confident you are." Jasper chuckled softly. 100%. At one side, Miss Stone had been silent the entire time. However, at this moment, she displayed a cold smirk. "Mr. Lane, don't talk big. In order to side with you, Miss Maynard has had to bear a very huge risk. Jasper furrowed his brows and looked at Miss Stone. He said coldly, "There are only advantages and no disadvantages to this plan, no matter for Colossal Investments or Miss Maynard. This is a plan that benefits three parties, including me. Miss Maynard needs a huge contribution to stabilize her position, and there can only be one voice in the Terra region. It would either be hers or William's. Miss Maynard, if you're worried that this plan isn't reliable, then you can say no. I'm not begging you to work with me." After Jasper said that, Miss Stone had a horrible expression on her face. When she was about to say something, Celine said, "All right, Miss Stone, your emotions are too stirred up." Miss Stone looked angry, but she did not dare to say anything more. However, it could be seen that she hated Jasper to the bone from the way she looked at him. Jasper did not know why this woman was so hostile toward him. At the same time, Jasper's phone rang. It was from Jack. "I need to answer this call." "Excuse me." After Jasper said that to Celine, he walked away to answer his phone. Miss Stone looked at Jasper's back with rancor and could not help but say, "Miss Maynard, why is he so menacing? I can't stand him believing himself to be infallible. Who does he think he is? He thinks he's all that just because of something he did. Miss Maynard, you're the general manager of Colossal Investments in the Terra region, and he's still acting so cocky in front of you." Celine looked at Miss Stone and said with an indifferent expression, "Firstly, he's not being cocky. You're the one who's deliberately infuriating others the entire time. You're minding too much as a secretary. Don't you notice that?" Celine's words caused Miss Stone's expression to freeze. She was speechless for a moment. "Mr. Lane, it's done." From his voice, Jack sounded incredibly excited. The main reason why Montaigne Capitals invested in Senna was to make money. Now that Jasper was offering them a reasonable price and they've acknowledged Colossal Investments' background, Montaigne Capitals did not hesitate too much before signing the agreement with Jack. After Jasper heard this, he let out a huge sigh of relief. Compared to Montaigne Capitals, Colossal Investments was a harder bone to chew. However, his lie had finally become reality now. "Send the copy of the contract to me." After Jasper said that, he hung up the phone. Jasper then walked in front of Celine and said, "Miss Maynard, you want confidence, right? I'll show you right now." After he said that, his phone buzzed. It was an MMS from Jack. Jasper opened the MMS in front of Celine. After the slow loading time, a contract appeared. It was the agreement stating that Montaigne Capitals had agreed to transfer their 34% shares in Senna to JW Capitals. When Celine was about to let out a breath of relief after seeing this agreement, she suddenly noticed a detail. "You signed this agreement today?" Celine lifted her head in shock to look at Jasper. Jasper smiled softly and said, "It's the truth no matter when it's signed, right?" Celine was a smart woman. If she could be crowned the queen of investment in her previous life and got to the position of executive chairwoman in Colossal Investments, it was proof that she was not just a pretty woman to look at. After pondering for a while, she immediately understood what was going on. "Good tactic, Mr. Lane." Celine sounded a little angry after she had been lied to. At the same time, her tone was also laced with admiration for Jasper, but at the end of the day, it sounded more complicated than that. She did not expect there would be a day when she would be lied to. However, this lie was not truly a lie. "Mr. Lane, can you tell me how you did it?" Celine asked. Jasper smiled and said, "I told you this morning that I have 34% of the shares, and then I told almost the same things to Montaigne Capitals. Coincidentally, both of you believe me. So, my lie is not a lie anymore." Celine was not a petty woman. After Jasper explained things, and she understood what was going on, she said sincerely, "Mr. Lane, your tactic is amazing. Very old-fashioned." Standing at one side, Miss Stone's expression changed. She yelled angrily, "You're a liar indeed." Jasper peered at her and said insipidly, "Did you not see my agreement? I already have the 34% shares. How am I lying?" Miss Stone said coldly, "But you said it yourself that you didn't have it when you were here this morning. You admitted that. The business world is like a war zone, and this is one of the tactics," Jasper said flatly. "You only have yourself to blame for being unable to see through this." Miss Stone was so mad that her face had turned white. When she was about to say something, she saw that the way Celine was looking at her was becoming colder and colder. Miss Stone felt flustered and quickly shut her mouth. However, she was cursing Jasper 1,000,000 times in her heart. Jasper ignored her. He looked at Celine and said, "Now, the basis for our collaboration has officially been formed. Miss Maynard, can we talk about the transfer of the shares now?" Celine said indifferently, "There's nothing to talk about. We agree unanimously on your conditions. I've already prepared the documents, too." While she said that, Celine took out a transfer of shares agreement to hand it to Jasper. After Jasper looked at it and made sure there was nothing wrong with it, he signed it instantly. For now, Jasper had successfully pocketed Senna's shares that were stranded out there. "The money will be transferred into your preferred account today," Jasper said with a smile. "Mr. Lane, you already have 59% of Senna's shares now. May I know what you're going to do next?" Celine asked curiously. Jasper chuckled lightly and said, "I'm going to send a huge surprise to Dane from Senna, of course." Celine looked as if she was in deep thought. Finally, she smiled and reached out to Jasper. She said, "Even though there were a lot of ups and downs, no matter what, I'm still going to wish us all the best in working together." Jasper reached out his hand to hold Celine's. He smiled and said, "Best of luck. I hope I still have a chance to work with you in the future, Mr. Lane. However, I hope such exciting things won't happen again." Celine displayed a look of terror and said jokingly. Jasper chuckled lightly and said, "I'm sure we will have a chance to work together in the future." When Jasper was about to leave, Celine walked him to the door and said, "Mr. Lane, William was warned by the higher-ups regarding this. He's furious now, so he might have some misunderstandings toward you. If you come across him in the future, you have to be careful." Jasper looked deeply at Celine and said, "Miss Maynard, it seems that you're more than happy for me to be rivals with William." Celine said calmly, "You tricked me as well, Mr. Lane. So I think we're even now that I've appropriately transferred some of William's anger onto you." After laughing, Jasper said, "Sounds fair." Celine smiled and said, "The enemy of my enemy is my friend. I hope to replace William's position, and since you've already offended William, then you should just go to the extreme. This way we can be closer friends." Jasper looked deeply at Celine. He felt that this woman was not so easy to deal with. "Farewell. Safe travels." While looking at Jasper's back, a complicated twinkle appeared in Celine's eyes. Suddenly, she chuckled softly and said, "This man didn't get angry even after I put it out in the open. He's such a sharp-witted man. What right does he have to get angry?" Miss Stone finally found a chance to speak and said coldly, "He's the one who tricked us first. But when we were directing William's anger to him, we didn't know he was setting this scheme, and we're still feeling pleased with ourselves like dummies," Celine said. Miss Stone said angrily, "Miss Maynard, I told you we have to be careful of this man. I know for certain that he's not a good person. So, you're saying that I have a horrible perception of people?" Celine asked airily. Miss Stone's expression changed as she said hurriedly, "I didn't mean that." Celine said coldly, "That's why you'll always be a secretary. There are no real friends or real enemies in the business world. Mr. Lane was indeed the person who set a trap this time, but did his trap hurt our profits? Not only did it not, but it also gave us a good chance to strike William's prestige. This is a good thing for us." Miss Stone said aggrievedly, "I just can't stand him. I know my husband asked you to report to him about anyone of the opposite sex who appears around me, but I'm working. Do you understand?" After Miss Stone heard this, her expression changed. "Miss Maynard, you've misunderstood. You should know best whether I've misunderstood or not," Celine said calmly. "You don't have to explain anymore. Since I've said it, it means that I'm very confident. Do you need me to show you the proof? Our marriage is based on mutual benefits. We need each other, and that's why we got married. I'll allow him to be a male chauvinist in the right amount. But I hope you can understand that if you infuriate me, there won't be good outcomes for both of you. Especially you. You should know your position because you're just a chess piece." After Celine said that, she turned around to leave. Miss Stone stood where she was, and her expression fluctuated irregularly. After recovering from the post-traumatic stress, she gritted her teeth in rancor and said coldly, "Jasper, this is all your fault. Just you wait." After successfully buying 59% of Senna's shares, Jasper was in a great mood. Even though he had spent $350 million on these shares, not only did he not lose money, but instead he made a profit. Once he successfully combined Senna and Terry's own, this $350 million would be $3.5 billion or even more. After he went back to the office, Jasper noticed that Theo and Zane were here. Logan was telling them about Dane swinging by. All of them had furious expressions on their faces. Even Theo, who just joined, had a gloomy look on his face. After all, for these hot-blooded young people, it was not a good thing to be hacked and then get bullied by the other party. Damn it, if I was here, I would have beaten up that Warren guy until his mother can't even recognize him, the hot-tempered Don yelled angrily. Hudson was focused on his computer. He said without turning his head, "Then what? Get arrested? Do you think it's worth it to get locked up for a few days because of something like this? Don't you think people will laugh at you after word about it gets out?" Zane said while feeling pissed, but you can't let him feel so pleased with himself. He won't be pleased with himself after tomorrow. Jasper walked over and said while beaming. After they heard Jasper's voice, they lifted their heads to look over in surprise. "Have we stabilized the machinery room?" Jasper asked. Zane said excitedly, "Yes, and it's all thanks to Theo. He wrote some codes which greatly increased our defense. If not, I think we would have needed to work overtime again tonight." Theo said while feeling a little embarrassed, No, it was everyone's hard work. I wouldn't have been able to do so much on my own." Jasper smiled and said, "You don't have to be modest. Everyone has witnessed your ability." After he said that, Jasper looked at Hudson. He said with a smile, "Hud, are you interested in going to Capital City tomorrow?" At this critical moment, there must be something especially important for Jasper to ask Hudson to go outstation in Capital City. Hudson asked curiously, "Why?" Jasper smiled softly and said, "Do you want to experience how comfortable the chair under Dane's but in Senna's headquarters is?" Jasper's words caused the entire office to go into a state of commotion. "What do you mean?" Cameron widened his eyes and looked like a curious child. "Why do I not understand what he's saying?" Logan asked foolishly. Zane scratched his head and said worriedly, "Mr. Lane, have you gone stupid from anger? It's not worth it to get sick from anger because of people like that. It's not worth it at all." Daniel coughed awkwardly and said to Jasper, "Mr. Lane, Zane is right. We'll just think of a way to get it back. We don't have to hurt ourselves." Theo wanted to say something, but since he had just joined the team and had not fully blended in with them, he did not dare to talk bad about Jasper. On the other hand, Hudson looked heatedly at Jasper like he had a lot of things to ask. Jasper chuckled lightly and slammed his phone, displaying the MMS Jack sent, as well as the agreement he signed with Colossal Investments just now on the table. "I'm Senna's boss now." A tossed stone would cause 1,000 ripples. The entire house went silent. Everyone was staring at the photo on the phone and the freshly signed agreement. What was left was the sound of all of them, their gulping. Zane then pinched Daniel, who was standing next to him, with all his might. Daniel yelped in pain and broke the silence. He said angrily to Zane, "Why did you pinch me? I wanted to know if it's true. I thought I was too exhausted from working overtime that I started to hallucinate. But judging from your reaction, it seems to be true." Cameron started at the agreement, and his saliva dripped down from his mouth. He said, "It's real. Of course it's real. It's black and white, and there's also the official seal. How could he have faked this?" Hudson looked at Jasper in shock and said in disbelief, "You bought Senna?" Jasper pulled a chair over and sat down. He said, "Indeed. Senna has a big business now, and Terry's own can't compare to them, be it talents or technology reserves. So, Terry's own is not Senna's rival. It's a fact. After thinking about it, there just isn't a better plan. Since Senna is so great, then I should just buy it. After I buy it, then we'll be a family. We don't have to worry about them attacking us." Did you hear what this man said? He bought the other person's company because he disagreed with them? Since they were too strong and he could not compare to them. That was why he bought their company? This was as if he was too lazy to queue in the bank, so he directly bought the entire bank to avoid queuing. Yeah, there was no problem with that logic. Zane and the gang's hearts were shaking. Their throats felt dry, and they kept swallowing their saliva. They looked at the agreement and then back at Jasper. In the end, they drew long breaths and sighed. The next morning, Jasper and Hudson showed up in Cavern City International Airport with Julian. After about half an hour, Jack hurriedly came out from the exit. After the four of them met up, Jack solemnly took out a shares transfer agreement to Jasper. "Luckily, I didn't fail to accomplish this mission," Jack smiled and said. Jasper looked at the contract worth $200 million in his hand and smiled. He said, "Thanks for the hard work." Jack shook his head and said, "I'm just doing my job." Jasper said, "I'm going to Capital City with HUD now to incorporate Senna into our troops. Since we won't be in Terry's zone, I'm going to trouble you to watch over it for me." Jack smiled and said, "All right, I'll keep an eye on it." The two of them shook hands. Then, Jasper led Hudson and Julian onto the plane. A few hours later, Hudson felt his heartbeat fluctuating when he was outside Senna's headquarters that was located in the best location, in the depths of the bustling commercial district. He looked up at Senna's gigantic logo hanging above the building. "Dane just went to Terry's zone yesterday. I didn't think that we'd come to his den today," Hudson said. "How do you feel?" Jasper smiled and said. Hudson's eyes looked firm as he said, "In the future, Terry's zone will definitely be more powerful than Senna." Jasper laughed. It was good that Hudson had ambitions. This was how the head of a future trillion-dollar company should look like. The three of them headed into the building. The moment they got through the door, Jasper and Hudson were stopped by two security guards. The guards walked over. When they saw that they did not have employee tags and looked foreign, the guards immediately determined that they were not employees of Senna. They quickly asked, "Stop right there. What are you doing here?" "We're here to discuss something," Jasper said insipidly. "Register as visitors, please." The guard was taking his job seriously. While he was at it, he also asked, "Who are you looking for? Do you have an appointment?" "Dane Warren." "I don't have an appointment." Jasper's answer caused the guard to lift his head. He then scoffed. "You're looking for our chairman? You're looking for our chairman, and no one's here to welcome you? You guys look impoverished, and yet you're barging in here to look for our chairman with nothing." While he said that, the guard placed down the register book and waved his hand impatiently to chase Jasper and Hudson away. However, the moment he was about to do something, Julian, who was eyeing covetously from the back, charged over and grabbed the guard's arm. The guard yelped. When he was about to escape, he realized that the man's palm was like a pair of pincer pliers, gripping his wrist tightly. He could not escape from his grip no matter what. "Damn it, let go of me!" The guard was nervous as he yelled. In an instant, 3 to 5 security guards who were on duty came over. They were looking at Jasper and the rest with unfriendly faces. One of them said, "Are you looking for trouble? Don't you know where this is? How dare you behave atrociously at this place?" "Julian," Jasper said insipidly, "don't hurt anyone." Jasper was here to incorporate Senna into his troops. He did not come here to fight with the security guards. Julian nodded and pushed the guard away. He backed away and stood next to Jasper with a calm expression on his face. Jasper led Hudson forward with his hands on his back. With Julian around, the guards did not dare to stop them. They could only stare fixedly at the group. When they got to the elevator, a staff member with some documents in her arms walked out just in time. As such, Jasper stopped her. "Hello, which floor is the chairman's office on?" The woman blushed when she saw the elegant and refined man in front of her. She said, "16th floor." "Thanks." After thanking her, Jasper led Hudson and Julian into the elevator before pressing the button to the 16th floor. The 16th floor was the core office in Senna. There was a huge meeting room here, as well as Dane's office and the office of the chairman's secretary. The other higher-ups would be working on the lower floors. From this alone, Dane's superior status in Senna could be seen clearly. Inside the meeting room, all of the higher-ups in Senna were sitting upright and still as they listened to Dane's speech. "This time, we have to make up our minds to get rid of those little companies that will affect the development of Senna." After being humiliated in Terry's zone, Dane rushed back to Capital City that very night. He was so furious that he did not get a good night's sleep. Today, he called all of the higher-ups to have this meeting early in the morning. He decided to teach Terry's zone a lesson to let them know that they would not have anything good awaiting them after offending him. "We're the ensign for the internet industry in the country. We're the #1 web portal among the 4. In this country, it can be said that Senna is the boss. Dane coldly scanned the higher-ups in the room with an arrogant look in his eyes. His words sounded powerful and resonating. Senna is going to float very soon, and once it's done, all of you will be the higher-ups of a listed company. You guys will have vestings, and it'll be able to make you into millionaires overnight. The higher-ups were excited as they looked passionately and enthusiastically at Dane. The news about Senna signing an agreement to float with colossal investments was not a secret in the office anymore. At this moment, everyone was calculating how much money they could make as a higher-up in a listed company after Senna floated successfully. However, before that, we have to crush Terryzone. Then, we'll dominate the instant messaging market in the country. Once we've done that, the stock price of Senna will be higher and the valuation will be much higher as well. Hence, you'll get even more benefits. Dane looked at the excited faces of the higher-ups and laughed loftily. He was enjoying the feeling of being chased after and worshipped. Jasper, I want to see how you'll compete with me now. Suddenly, Dane felt a slight hint of remorse. He wanted so badly to get Jasper here to let him see how many talents he had under him and how much power he held. If this power erupted, they would be able to crush Terryzone into pieces in a blink of an eye. At this moment, it was as if Dane's wishes had come true. Suddenly, the door was being pushed open from the outside. Jasper had Hudson by his side and Julian behind him as the three of them appeared at the door of the meeting room. Are you having a meeting? Good. Then I don't need to get all of you here one by one. Most of the higher-ups in the meeting room did not know Jasper, but they did know what Hudson looked like as he was the company's rival for the past 2 days. When they saw Hudson, they displayed extremely shocked expressions on their faces. They did not understand why he was in the meeting room of their company. Now, this scene was like the leader of the enemy suddenly barging into the other troops' base camp when the two troops were facing each other and were about to go to battle and fight. Dane was staring straight at Jasper, and his face looked like he had just seen a ghost. Jasper, what are you doing here? Dane cried out involuntarily. He then roared with a dark expression on his face after he came back to his senses. Security. Where's security? Why did they just let irrelevant people inside? Don't they know that the company is having a meeting with the higher-ups? Dane had a bad feeling in his heart when he saw Jasper and Hudson showing up all of a sudden. At this moment, a group of security guards hurried over. While they were facing Dane's roars with their faces turning pale, they gasped and said, "Mr. Warren." They barged in forcefully. Dane ignored the guard and looked at Jasper gloomily. He said with an insincere smile, "Jasper, who do you think you are? I went to Terryzone yesterday, so you came to my place today. Do you think we're kids playing house?" Jasper walked into the meeting room with his hands behind his back and said dully, "The reason I'm here today is to announce a few things, and while I'm at it, I need to call a meeting." Dane started guffawing from anger. "Is there something wrong with your brain? This is Senna. This is my company, and you're telling me that you're here to announce a few things and call a meeting? If your brain is faulty, you should go to the psychiatric hospital for treatment. Stop causing a ruckus here. Do you understand?" Hudson looked coldly at Dane and said, "Dane, watch your mouth. If not, you'll be the one who's going to be embarrassed and put in an awkward position." Dane chortled and pointed at Hudson to say, "More, when I started Senna, you were still in school. Since when do you have the right to speak to me? What's wrong? Is Terryzone struggling now? I went to you to purchase Terryzone yesterday, and you rejected me. Are you coming to beg me now?" Dane chuckled coldly and said nonchalantly, "However, I won't give you such a favorable price anymore. 5 million. I'm going to give you 5 million for Terryzone now. If you don't agree, then get out of my company and wait for my Senna to crush your Terryzone bit by bit." Dane's arrogance and overbearingness that was well known in the country's internet industry was vividly and thoroughly displayed here. He genuinely looked down on Hudson and Jasper. Now he was trying to think of a way to humiliate them back after he was humiliated by them yesterday. With a light chuckle, Jasper said insipidly to Dane, "So you think you're the only one who can come to Terryzone unannounced, and I can't come to Senna to reciprocate?" Dane scoffed and said, "You're comparing Terryzone with Senna? Are you insane?" Not only Dane, but the rest of the higher-ups were also looking at Jasper and Hudson like they were idiots. They felt that these two might have something wrong with their brains, and came here to get insulted and humiliated. Indeed, Terry's own is still small now, but after a few years, Senna won't even be fit to lick Terra's own shoes, said Jasper coldly. Dane was staring blankly at him before guffawing loudly. The higher-ups were all laughing as well. The entire meeting room was filled with their jeers and irreverent laughter. Jasper shook his head amidst the laughter of Dane and the rest. He said, "Even though I want to use my ability to prove it to you, I can't wait anymore." Slam! 2 agreements were slammed down on the table. This is the stock transfer agreements signed by Montaigne Capitals and Colossal Investments to transfer their shares to JW Capital. These 2 agencies have transferred their shares from Senna to JW Capital, and with their shares combined, it's a total of 59%. So in short, I am now the biggest shareholder in Senna. I'm ordering a shareholders meeting right now. Jasper turned around and faced the higher-ups in the room, who abruptly stopped laughing. Their expressions looked brilliant. Jasper's tone was cold but calm. He was emitting a majestic and imposing aura of a sovereign king who towered above the world while looking down at it. Dane stared at the 2 agreements on the table, his entire body shaking. The incomparable shock made him feel as if he had been electrocuted. His brain and limbs felt numb. How is that possible? Impossible! Dane howled madly. He grabbed the 2 documents and scanned the contents quickly. 2 statements were clearly stated in the agreements in black and white. Montaigne Capitals will sell their 34% shares in Senna to JW Capital for $200 million. Colossal Investments in the Terra region will be selling their 25% shares in Senna to JW Capital for $1.5 million. Dane's hands were shaking uncontrollably. Blinded by his rage, he violently ripped the 2 agreements into pieces. He stared malevolently at Jasper like a hurt wolf and roared wildly. "These are fake. These agreements are fake." Jasper smiled lightly and said, "The ones in your hands were only copies. If you like ripping things up, I still have a lot so you can rip them slowly. As for whether they're fake, you'll know after you make a few calls." Dane stumbled backward. He almost lost his footing and nearly fell to the ground. In the end, he clenched his fists and stared at Jasper to say, "How is that possible? I didn't get any news about this. Colossal Investments got Senna's shares in exchange for helping Senna float. How could they have transferred them to you? Are they not worried that I'll sue them?" Jasper chuckled lightly and said, "Have you become foolish from anger? I already have 34% after Montaigne Capitals transferred their shares to me, so I can make a 1-vote veto, and I vetoed Senna's plan to float. So, how are you going to float now? So, it was destined for you to violate the agreement. As it turned out, my collaboration with Colossal was very delightful." While he said that, Jasper shrugged and his face looked neutral. Dane's vision went black, and in the end, he still could not resist the urge to fall back into his chair. It looked as if all of his energy, vigor, and spirit had been sucked dry. He lifted his head to look at Jasper. His eyes were filled with extreme rancor. He said wretchedly, "What are you going to do now?" Jasper looked at the higher-ups and said coldly, "Now, as the biggest shareholder of Senna, I suggest we have a shareholders meeting right now. There are 2 topics of discussion for this meeting. Number 1, proposal to dismiss the chairman and director general of Senna, Dane Warren. Number 2, proposal to combine Senna and Terry's own. The first of these 2 topics of discussion was to get rid of Dane. The second one was to destroy the entire Senna. All of the higher-ups were in an uproar. Their faces looked alarmed, and they did not know what to do. Dane stood up suddenly and yelled with courage that he got from some unknown place. "Impossible. I won't agree to this. This is murder, and you're separating Senna. Even if you're the majority shareholder, you don't even have 67% of the shares, so you can't achieve a 2/3 voting right. I can still reject your proposal." Jasper seemed to have predicted this. He chuckled lightly and said, "All right, I announce that JW Capital will convertibly increase $300 million worth of shares for Senna. It will be diluted according to the corresponding proportion of the shares of the shareholders. Dane, it's either you follow and inject $300 million so that you can still be guaranteed 1/3 of the stock right, or my 59% will be increased to 85% after this injection. Everyone in the room was silent, including Dane. All of the higher-ups had pale faces at this moment. The silence was deafening. After Jasper did this, it was as if a clap of thunder had struck down on top of Senna, and it was going to turn over the entire company. Hudson was excited after watching this. He felt that some hot blood had been washed off from a deep part of his heart, and he needed to pour out what was on his mind. As a student of great ability, and the fact that he had led Terry's Own from nothing to what it was now, Hudson was pretty familiar with the operation of the capital in a company. The convertibly increased shares and fund injections were basically rogue strategies to hurt someone with money. For example, if a company had a market value of $1 million and had two shareholders, they would both own 50% of the shares. If one of the shareholders wanted to own a controlling number of shares in the company, and they convertibly increased 1 million of shares, then the company's market value would increase to 2 million. The shareholder who convertibly increased the shares would have 75% of the shares, while the other would have the remaining 25%. This strategy would usually be used by extremely powerful shareholders. This would be a frequent tactic for them to control the company. What Jasper was doing now was exactly that. If they were going to hurt each other with capitals and compare the depths of their pockets, then Dane Warren could not defeat Jasper Lane. After Jasper said that, Dane's face went gray. He knew he had failed by a landslide, and there was no saving him now. Never in his wildest dream would he imagine that Jasper would quietly complete the purchase of Senna in just one day. Even if he did not convertibly increase the shares, his 59% of the shares would seal the fate of Dane's tragic ending. Dane chuckled bitterly and looked at Jasper. He said, "You've won. You're savage. You're such a savage. Everyone in the industry says that I always do things by fair means or foul, but they're all blind. Jasper, you're the true savage. You go for the neck immediately and don't leave any room to maneuver. Splendid. Tremendous indeed." Jasper had on an indifferent expression while listening to Dane. There was no pleased look on his face, nor modesty. He looked as natural as if he was eating or drinking. "Who's agreeing or disagreeing with the two proposals I made before?" Jasper looked at the higher-ups of Senna while standing next to the table. His tone sounded calm, but there was great danger hiding in his voice. No one dared to stand up and disagree with him. They knew once they disagreed, there would be only one ending for them: to pack their things and leave. "I'm forfeiting." Dane closed his eyes and said as if he was submitting to his fate. When the higher-ups heard Dane saying that, they all lowered their heads. Dane stood up shakily and pointed to his seat. He smiled at Jasper and said, "This seat belongs to you now." Jasper did not decline. He walked straight to Dane's seat and sat down. At this moment, all of the higher-ups sighed internally. They knew that Senna had already staged a comeback. The flag of the internet industry in the country and the head of the 4 web portals, Senna had officially gotten a new boss. This would be a huge piece of news that would shake the internet industry in the whole nation. While sitting on the seat of honor in the meeting room, Jasper said flatly, "The decision has been made after the shareholders' meeting, and we'll be dismissing Dane as the chairman and director general of the company. After this, I'll sign the official document to pass it down to every department in the company. Now, the company will stop all attacks on Terry's Own and stop the plan to float. The rest of the tasks in human resources will stay the same." When he said this, Jasper looked at the higher-ups and said dully, "There's a change in the person with the highest position in the company, and it will undoubtedly affect the working attitude of the other employees. I hope everyone here can pacify the employees later, so that they can carry out their jobs as usual. Even though the owner of Senna has changed, we still can't relax about what should be done and what needs to be done." The higher-ups looked at each other, and someone even stole a glance at Dane. However, they saw that Dane was like a cock that had lost in a cockfight. He had lost his spirit, vigor, and energy. He was sitting at one side like a puppet. The higher-ups sighed, and it was unknown who took the lead to call out, "Yes, Mr. Lane? Yes, Mr. Lane." All of the higher-ups agreed at the same time. Jasper nodded and said, "Dismiss." The higher-ups walked out one after another. Before leaving, they would subconsciously look at Jasper and Dane. One of them was full of mettle, like a new king who just ascended the throne. The other one had his head lowered in dejection, after being kicked out of the position of power. After the higher-ups left, this earthquake that started from the core of Senna immediately spread throughout the office. After that, it spread to the outside world before finally shocking the entire nation. Inside the meeting room, Dane walked out the room dispiritedly. He knew he did not have a place in Senna anymore. "Mr. Warren, wait," Jasper called out to stop Dane. When Dane heard Jasper changing the way he addressed him, he clenched his teeth and turned around to look at Jasper. He asked, "Are you going to humiliate me again?" Jasper said unenthusiastically, "I plan to invite you, Mr. Dane Warren, to be the new general manager of Senna. I wonder if you're interested in this?" Dane was startled after he heard that. He stared fixedly at Jasper, and his eyes were filled with doubt. "Aren't you going to kick me out of Senna?" Dane was not the only one with this question. Even Hudson was curious. He looked at Jasper curiously to know the reason. Jasper said flatly, "I detest your moral character, Mr. Warren, but I have to admit that as the founder, you're responsible for getting Senna to the scale it is now and its achievements. Do you think I purchased Senna just to kick you out and vent my anger? That's too childish. You're beneficial to the company, so I'll consider keeping you. If you weren't, then I'd kick you out even if you're super close to me," Jasper said, and stood up to walk to Dane. He continued, "Now, even though Senna's owner has changed, Senna is still Senna. I still hope that it will continue to develop under your leadership." Dane's body shook slightly. What happened today had too many twists and turns. Dane felt as if he was on a roller coaster, and his mood was fluctuating so rhythmically. When he was feeling fully content with his achievements, Jasper purchased Senna. When he was feeling mad and frustrated, Jasper gave him an opportunity. Dane even felt as if he was a puppet under Jasper's control that would do whatever Jasper wanted him to. Dane clenched his fists tightly and looked reluctantly at the meeting room as well as the bright and wide office. This was all his blood and sweat. "I'll do it," Dane closed his eyes and said. Jasper smiled and reached out his hand to Dane. Dane reached out as well to hold Jasper's hand tightly. The two men looked into each other's eyes. Dane suppressed his anger and hatred, hiding them in the deepest part of his heart, leaving only conflicts behind. In ancient times, Queen Boudica had suffered patiently but firmly resolved for revenge. Now, Dane Warren would be willing to bear the humiliation to save his skin for the time being in order to avenge himself in the future. Jasper patted Dane's shoulder and pretended that had not noticed anything. His smile looked tranquil and unhurried. Inside the chairman's office. Of course, Dane would not be able to continue staying in this office anymore. After he packed his things, he went downstairs to find an empty office. He hung the plaque stating General Manager and went inside. On the other hand, Jasper and Hudson were having tea in the chairman's office. Dane truly knows how to enjoy himself, Jasper smiled and said while taking a sip of the superior green tea. Hudson looked admiringly at Dane's office with a floor area that was exaggeratedly large. There was a parlor, meeting room, and lounge inside his office. When he thought back to his simple and unpresentable office, he sighed. "I wouldn't have known if I hadn't made a comparison." After comparing, Terry's own indeed can't compare to Senna. Jasper laughed and said, "You don't have to undervalue yourself. Even though Terrazone's office is unpresentable, the feeling it gave me was much better than a bright and wide office." Hudson nodded and smiled. He said, "I believe Terry's own will soon have an office that's much more extravagant than this one. You don't have to worry that I'll pay less attention to Terry's own, because I have Senna now." Jasper laughed and said, "It would be better for him to say something earlier. In the future, JW Consortium will keep Terry's own and Senna as two separate companies, but the two of them will naturally be the closest allies." JW Consortium. This was the first time Hudson heard Jasper saying this. From here, he was able to know some of Jasper's ambitions. He wanted to turn JW Capital into a financial group that was built up of different companies. This was not an idea that a normal person would have. Hudson sucked in a deep breath. He decided that whether JW Consortium would be a reality or no matter what stage it would get to in the future, his Terry's own must be the best among all of the other companies. After coming out of the office, Jasper lifted his gaze to see Dane. He was standing at the door, hesitating whether to knock or not. After their eyes met, Dane felt a little embarrassed. "Is there anything I can help you with?" Jasper asked. Dane said challengingly, "I need to report on some business." Report? Dane had no idea when was the last time he reported something to someone. It could be years. After starting Senna, he was always the person with the highest power and the person who people reported to. Jasper nodded and allowed Dane into the office. He said, "What's wrong?" Dane quickly recomposed himself and said, "My job scope in the office has changed. So who's going to be responsible for the work that's going to come in after this?" "What's the arrangement?" Jasper said, "Still you?" Jasper looked at Dane, who had a look of shock on his face, and said enthusiastically, "I'll arrange someone to be the Director General of Senna. When that happens, you just need to cooperate with him." Dane felt his heart tighten as he asked, "May I know who that will be?" "Jack Tanner." Dane was proud and arrogant. He would not allow himself to surrender to Jasper. Jasper knew this from the start. In fact, Jasper had considered kicking Dane out of Senna before. However, this would cause a very intractable problem for Jasper. He did not have many people who could handle such a huge company like Senna. Senna was such a huge company, so he would need a professional and experienced team to operate this company. Jasper was not a god, so he would not be able to support Senna on his own. As such, keeping Dane was one of his stopgap measures. Besides, it would be impossible for Jasper to completely trust Dane. In his previous life, after Dane Senna became a listed company, he had a huge conflict with the financiers because of his attitude. When they were at the most serious phase, he led his management team to threaten the financiers. He said if they did not fulfill his requirements, they would have a mass resignation. This attitude had angered the financiers completely, so they kicked Dane out of Senna. As the founder, Dane was fired by his own company. This was the first time it happened in the country and caused such a controversy. As such, Jasper understood that Dane was useful, but he could not give him too many responsibilities. Terry's Own was slowly progressing now, and with Hudson around, Terry's Own would be fine. As such, Jack could finally make some time. As for management, Jack's ability was enough to give Dane a crushing defeat. Jasper was reassured to transfer him to Senna. Dane was stumped for words after he heard Jack's name. He eventually nodded, and Jasper could not tell whether he was happy or angry. "I'll tell Jack to brief you later about what's going to happen next." After hearing Jasper's statement that sounded like a dismissal, Dane turned around to leave. "Mr. Lane, are you going to transfer Mr. Tanner to Senna?" Hudson asked. Jasper nodded and said, "Back then when I transferred Jack to Terry's Own, I told you he was there to help you manage the company, as he could use his experience in worse off to help you guys build a management system. Now, Terry's Own is tentatively stabled, so you alone will be enough." Hudson sighed and said, "Jack and I had so much fun working together, and we're pretty close in private too. I'm a little reluctant for him to leave just like that." Jasper laughed and said, "Everyone is still under JW, so you'll still get a chance to meet in the future." Hudson smiled and nodded. After making the decision, Jasper called Jack and told him his intention to transfer him to Senna. Jack was stumped for words, and it was evident that he was shocked. Then he frowned and said, "Mr. Lane, I'm not complaining to you, but I just don't think I'll be able to break new ground within a short period after going to Senna." Jasper smiled and said, "Senna is filled with Dane's people. Even if he has been demoted to the general manager position, he's still a core member. A leader who just fell from the sky like you will definitely not get the respect of everyone. So, you have to give me some support, Mr. Lane," Jack said jokingly. "I'll authorize you as the Director General of Senna. You can go look for the core members you want. This way, you'll have power, and we'll see how long you need to take down Senna completely," Jasper said. Jack's eyes lit up. To be honest, he was longing for a platform where he could fully exhibit his ability. Even though he was happy when he was in Terry's Own, at the end of the day, his hands and feet were bound. It was different now that he would be transferred to Senna. Even though it would be tough because Jasper wanted him to break the ice and break new ground, this was a test and also an opportunity. "All right, 3 months. You'll see results in 3 months," Jack said seriously. Jasper chuckled lightly and said, "If you don't accomplish that when the time comes, you'll get smacked." After he hung up the phone, Jasper went downstairs with Hudson for lunch. However, his phone rang again. Jasper took a look, and it was from Dawson. He quickly answered the call. Jasper, remember what I told you back then about Easy Media? You need to close the deal as soon as possible. I received news that someone with an extensive background has met up with the King brothers, and they're planning to buy their company. After Jasper heard that, his face became solemn. He asked, an extensive background? Do you know who that is? Dawson said, I have no idea, but according to my friend, he's the son of one of the rich families in Capital City. If we don't get this right, it'll be troublesome for us. Jasper frowned and said, I'm in Capital City now. Give me the contact number, Uncle Schuler. I'll handle this as soon as I can. Dawson gave him an address before saying seriously, Jasper, I have more than 10 years of friendship with this friend of mine, so he's reliable. You can go to this place to find him. I don't think he'll lie to me. If the other party really comes from Swallow Capital residents, then we'll just give up if we know we'll fail even if we give it a try. After all, there are still a lot of entertainment companies out there. If we can't buy this one, we can buy another. However, the people from the great institution are not easy to deal with, and they're very demanding as well. We don't have to cause trouble to ourselves. Jasper smiled and said after hearing that, Don't worry, Uncle Schuler. I'll go about things while sticking to the norms. Dawson laughed and said, I know, but you don't have to be weak. We're not fruitcakes that will allow people to do just anything to us. All right then, go and take care of your business now. After he hung up the phone, Jasper tapped the surface of the desk with his fingertips. He looked as if he was in deep thought. Even though Hudson did not know what was going on, from Jasper's face, he could tell he had come across a difficult problem. He became silent as well and did not disturb Jasper's train of thought. According to his memories of his previous life, on the surface, Easy Media always had the King brothers as the person in charge. However, Jasper had heard from some gossip forums that the King brothers came from an extensive background. Back then, he thought it was just a joke from the netizens. However, from the looks of it now, it might be true. No matter in which industry, Jasper knew that he would need to interact with people on a much higher level in the country if he had come to this stage. However, he did not expect this to happen this fast. However, the sky was gradually turning dark, and it was not convenient for him to go visit them now. As such, Jasper decided to only think about this tomorrow. The next morning, he came out from the hotel. Since Jack would be coming to Capital City today, Jasper arranged for Hudson to pick Jack up before familiarizing himself in Senna's office with Hudson. On the other hand, he would go to East Cotter Road. There, he found an office building in the most well-known central business district in Swallow Capital. Rosie Commercial Consultants. Jasper looked at the signboard and walked in. Hello, sir. Who are you looking for? The beautiful receptionist asked courteously. Jim Yap, Jasper said. The receptionist was staring blankly at him before quickly saying, Oh, you're here for Mr. Yap. Please wait. After she said that, she made a call. After a while, she gestured respectfully for Jasper to follow her. Jasper came to the door of an office after following the receptionist. Then, a portly middle-aged man walked out of the office. You're Dawson's son-in-law, Jasper, right? Jim laughed loudly and pulled Jasper into the office. Hello, Uncle Yap, Jasper smiled and asked. Jasper could tell that Dawson had a great relationship with Jim after Jim's first sentence to him. If not, he would not directly call him Dawson's son-in-law. It was obvious that these two had discussed this matter before. Jim looked at Jasper up and down before saying in satisfaction, Not bad. You're young and have outstanding talents. An excellent young man like you is not easy to find even in Swallow Capital. Jasper smiled and said, I just rely on my luck. I don't dare to look down on everyone on Earth. Jim chortled and said candidly, People who don't belong together don't get to live together. You're just like Dawson when he was young. You're talented and yet so humble. The two of them chatted for a while before Jim said, Jasper, before this Dawson said you're planning to buy an entertainment company. I had asked everywhere about this matter. I think you know what happened in the end. Easy Media had every intention to sell, but the bosses of this entertainment company are brothers. Back then, they did not have a united opinion, so they delayed this for some time. After this delay, trouble arose. Another rival has appeared, and he has such an extensive background. When Jasper heard this, he asked, Who is he? Jim chuckled and said, Swallow Capital is not the same as other cities. There are a lot of high-ranking officials and big shots here. According to my knowledge, the one who appeared this time belongs to the second-ranking family in Swallow Capital. Jasper frowned slightly. The second-ranking family in Swallow Capital. Even the wealthiest family in the province would not be able to compete with them if they were placed in the same room. Plus, their family should have a very deep connection to the people who did publicity. Otherwise, this young master from the later generation would not want to buy a media company. After all, his family already has the resources, so it would have been easy for him to do this. Jim's face looked solemn as he said, "So, Jasper, if you're very determined, we shall give it a try. If you think this is dispensable, I suggest that you give up." Jasper smiled and said, "Uncle Yap, since I'm here, I don't plan to give up so easily even if the other party has a powerful background. When it comes to business, I can't stay away from it just because he has his eyes on it, right? There's no rule about this anyway." Jim nodded and said, "All right, I understand. If that's the case, I'll pull some strings tonight to invite the King brothers for dinner. What do you think?" Jasper got up and smiled. "Thank you for going to all these troubles for me, Uncle Yap." Jim smiled and patted Jasper's shoulder. He said, "You're Dawson's son-in-law, so you're kind of like my nephew. Naturally, I'll help you if I'm able to." The two of them walked out of the office while chatting. When they got to the door of the company, Jasper wanted to bid farewell to Jim when he heard an ear-piercing voice. "Jim Yap, people always say you'll get smarter as you age, but I think you're getting more stupid as you age. How dare you steal the business Mr. Coombe has his eyes on?" Jasper and Jim looked over to see a middle-aged man in his 30s walking over to them with a cold smirk on his face. When Jim saw this man, his face fell. He smirked and replied, "I contacted Easy Media first, and it's Mr. Coombe's business if he's interested in them too. Are you saying I can't even show an interest in them now? George, you're just a middleman, so why are you acting like a poser in front of me?" George Powell scoffed and said, "You're saying it like you're so goddamn noble. If I'm a middleman, aren't you one as well? The only difference between us is that I'm working for Mr. Coombe this time. And you? Hurry up and tell your guy to tuck his tail between his legs and scram." Mr. Coombe said, "If anyone dares to steal Easy Media from him, then it'll mean that they're deliberately embarrassing him." Jim had a horrible expression on his face, and he subconsciously peered at Jasper. There was restrained fear and anger in his eyes. George was pleased with Jim's gaze. He looked at Jasper and said in disbelief, "Is this the person who wants to steal Easy Media from Mr. Coombe? He looks like an idiot who still needs his bottle." "Ha! What a joke." Jasper looked at George with no expression on his face. He said dully, "I had my eyes on it first, so if you're talking about stealing, I think your master, Mr. Coombe, is the one who's stealing from me. Plus, who do you think you are? Do you think you have the right to interrupt us?" After Jasper said this, George was furious. On the contrary, Jim smiled and felt extremely pleased. He said in his heart, "Attaboy, he's not a coward at all." George glared at Jasper ferociously and said, "Before you came out, didn't your parents tell you to be more low-profile outside so that you don't offend other people?" Jasper answered unenthusiastically, "The elders in my home did tell me to be humble and low-profile outside. Plus, they also told me not to hold others in contempt so rashly." When George heard this, he thought Jasper was scared and lacking in confidence. Just as he was about to say something after smirking, he heard Jasper continue talking. "But they only told me that I should be courteous to humans. If a dog keeps barking madly at me, I can just kick it away." George's words that were on the tip of his tongue were then stuffed back into his throat forcefully. In an instant, his face looked extremely dark. Even Jim was stumped for words. Then, he guffawed and felt extremely carefree. George was his rival, and even their companies were in the same building. There were a lot of enemies in the same industry, but one could know how horrible their relationship was just from the looks of it. Jim had contacted Easy Media, and this man in front of them, named George, was coming between them right now, while using Mr. Coombe to separate them. He was just using Mr. Coombe's power and influence to mock and ridicule Jim for the past few days. Today, Jim did not expect he would be able to vent his anger through Jasper. Jim's laughter caused George's face to become even darker. There was a hint of coldness in his eyes that were glaring at Jasper. You little idiot. Aren't you afraid that people will step on you for being so cocky and swallow capital? Jasper looked coldly at George and said flatly, kindness is always returned tenfold. But if you dare to cross me, you'll get a tenfold return as well. How cocky! You're so young, yet you're already such a gigantic poser. You should know that swallow capital is not as simple as you think it is. There are people you can't afford to offend. If you get stepped on, you can only lie on the ground and beg for mercy. George smirked, and his eyes were cold. Of course, there are a lot of people who'll step on me and swallow capital, but I can guarantee that you're not on the list. You're just a hired thug who barely wormed into their circle. Jasper shrugged, and there was an insipid look on his face. He was not even concerned about George at all. This kind of person was just a hired thug. His next meal depended on his boss' mood. No one could insult Jasper even if he was in swallow capital. Plus, he could not mess up the purchase of Easy Media because of someone like George. Naturally, Jasper would not show him respect. Who are you calling a hired thugs? George felt a fire of rage surging from his stomach, and it was heading straight to his head. He had been mingling in swallow capital for so many years, and aside from those members of the aristocratic families who came from the residence, he had never seen such an arrogant person before. Plus, he had asked around about the buyer who contacted Jim and knew he was not from swallow capital. In addition to that, he was definitely not someone from the residence. As such, George had no comebacks after Jasper kept calling him out. He felt as if he had been slapped a few times across the face and was in fiery pain. You little idiot. I'll teach you that you can't be too arrogant in swallow capital. After a cold chuckle from George, he turned around and yelled at the outside of the building. After a while, the door of a van outside opened and 5 to 6 burly men walked out. They all made their way over. Little idiot, it just so happened that I went out to settle some business and brought my men out for a meal. It's your unlucky day. George laughed nastily and said savagely. When Jim saw this, he frowned and barked at George. Hey, Powell, what are you trying to do? There are security cameras in the building, and you're trying to attack us here? Are you insane? After a scoff, George said coldly, shut up. You best F***CK off. Let me tell you, Mr. Coombe has got my back, and if you spew more T, then I'll F***CK you up too. Jim's expression was gloomy. He said to Jasper in a deep voice, Jasper, run back into the building. Run to my office and lock the door. Don't open the door if it's not me. I'll handle them. I've been in swallow capital for so many years. He won't dare to do anything to me. When Jasper saw that Jim was still helping him so sincerely at this critical moment, he felt slightly touched. He said, Uncle Yap, don't worry. They won't do anything to me. After Jim heard that, he said angrily, he won't do anything to you? George is not a good person. He went to jail when he was young because he fought with someone. Plus, he has Mr. Coombe's support now. You're young, so don't get so hot-blooded and impulsive. It's not embarrassing to admit defeat at this moment. You don't need to suffer this. Jasper shook his head and walked in front of Jim. Now he was protecting him. Julian, Jasper called out. Julian had been repressing it for a few days now, feeling pins and needles all over his body. He could not hold it in anymore. He stepped out, looking at George and his gang coldly. There were 5 beefy fighters next to George, so the man was extremely confident. When he saw what Jasper was doing, he could not help but burst out laughing. Idiot! You only have one person, and you dare to F***king fight with me? Man, kill that kid. I want to step on his face and ask if he still has the guts to be so arrogant. After George said that, the 5 men walked over with malevolent looks on their faces. Julian looked at Jasper. He was asking Jasper whether he should cripple these people. Of course, Jasper did not want to get into trouble with the law because of these thugs. He said flatly, go easy on them. Just teach them a lesson. Julian sighed in disappointment. He turned around and cracked his neck. Cracking sounds that sounded like beans getting stir-fried in a hot pan were heard from his body. With a low growl, he charged at the 5 of them like a wild beast out of its cage. It was evident that he was not afraid of the other party having more numbers than him. Those 5 fighters were dazed. These people always depended on their numbers when they fought, and their opponents would admit defeat even before the fight started. They had never seen the other party charging at them with such vigor, even when there was only one of them. "Damn it, go! Cripple him!" George roared nervously. At that moment, the two parties were tangled in a fight. Jim, who was being protected by Jasper, was extremely anxious. He did not expect Jasper to be so impulsive. He felt that something bad was going to happen tonight. If Jasper was beaten up by George at this place, then how would he be able to face his best friend Dawson? When he thought about this, Jim gritted his teeth and turned around to run to the lobby of the building. He opened the fire cabinet and took out an axe. He decided that he would not let anything happen to Jasper. However, when he was walking over with the axe, he saw George's men lying on the ground. They were wailing and begging for mercy. Jim was holding the axe after having made the decision of burning their boats, but now he was staring blankly ahead. This turn of events, why was it different from how he imagined it would be? Jasper saw the axe in Jim's hand and felt touched. He burst out laughing and said, "Uncle Yap, Julian is my bodyguard. He knows how to fight. He's great." At that moment, Jim did not know what to say. Aside from Jim, George felt as if he was watching a movie. How would a normal person in real life defeat 5 people at the same time? At this moment, Julian walked over to him. George was so scared that his entire body was shaking. Julian's emotionless eyes caused him to feel chills down his back. "Get away from me. Don't come any closer," George yelled before turning around to run away. However, the moment he turned around, he felt the back of his neck tightening. Then, he felt as if he was flying when Julian grabbed his neck and reverse slammed him in front of Jasper. With a loud thud, he fell flat on his face. Jim's face twitched. He was feeling pain for George as well. George felt as if his organs had shifted out of place. His stomach was churning, and he felt horrible. He tried hard to get up, but his entire body was limp and powerless. He lifted his head with all his might, but could only see Jasper's leather shoes. Jasper took a step forward and squatted. He bent over to look at George, patting his face. "You had a lot of fun calling me little idiot, huh?" George gritted his teeth tightly, but at this moment, even if he was resolute, he did not dare to speak anymore. "You kept saying that the stakes are high in Swallow Capital. Were you having fun acting like a poser?" George was gasping for air while enduring the pain in his chest and stomach. He opened his mouth challengingly and said, "Just kill me or hack me into pieces if you dare." "How stubborn." Jasper smiled, and his eyes went cold instantly. "You're just a thug of the lowest level in Swallow Capital society. So why are you acting like a Keeley in front of me?" A Keeley was a dialect and slang in Swallow Capital, meaning an old fox or a person unfit for society. Jasper lifted his hand to grab George's cheek and forced his head up to look into his eyes. Jasper said insipidly, "Yes, the stakes are high in Swallow Capital, but it has nothing to do with people like you. Don't think that just because you've been in Swallow Capital for a few years that you're a big shot here." George was shaking all over. He did not know whether he was trembling because of anger or pain. He felt that Jasper's statement had crushed his dignity into pieces before slamming them on the floor to get stomped on. George wanted so badly to have a dagger in his hand so that he could kill Jasper for making him feel this way. "Mr. Lane, let me remove one of his arms." Julian had been pissed with George's arrogance for a very long time. When he saw that he was still looking at Jasper, sinisterly with hatred on his face, he could not help but propose. In Julian's heart, Jasper was his savior, someone he respected the most in his world. He would not allow anyone to insult Jasper. He owed his life to Jasper, and he was not just saying that. If they were in a life and death situation one day, he would be willing to take a bullet for Jasper. When George heard this, the scenes of Julian fighting his 5 fighters until they were battered and bruised, as if he was the god of war, flashed across his brain. Then, he saw Julian walking over to him with eyes that were so icy they looked like they could kill. George was petrified. He had been in jail before and knew that some people really had the guts to kill. Plus, now Julian was saying that he would cripple one of George's arms. George did not doubt that if Jasper nodded, Julian would really do it. His intense fear washed away all of his hatred. His eyes were now filled with terror as they shook. No, I was wrong. I was so wrong. George completely became a coward. Sir, my good sir, please don't let him cripple me. There are security cameras all around the place. A big shot like you shouldn't have to get into trouble with the law because of a minor character like me, right? When George saw Jasper's calm and unchanged expression on his face, he quickly yelled at Jim, "Mr. Yap, please stop him. Don't make this into something big." Jim wanted so badly to spit on George's face right now. He had seen a lot of shameless people before, but he had never seen anyone as shameless as George. However, George was right. If Julian really did something to George, then Jasper would get into trouble because they were not at the feet of the Emperor. "Jasper, don't act rashly," Jim said softly. Jasper chuckled lightly. He had not planned to do anything to George from the start. The difference between an adult and a child was that one of them knew how to weigh the pros and cons. They would not be blinded by momentary emotions. If he crippled George, he would feel great. However, what was going to happen next? He would not be able to escape the consequences of his crimes. It would be such a tremendous loss if he caused Julian to get convicted because of a minor character like George. However, Jasper did not mind scaring him a little. "Tell me, who's that Mr. Coombe who's behind your back?" Jasper asked coldly. George did not dare to hide anymore. He spilled everything as if he was spilling a bag of beans. "Mr. Coombe is the second son of the Coombe family. He just came back from studying overseas. Since most of the big shots from the Coombe family are involved in public relations, and Mr. Coombe has a celebrity girlfriend, he plans to get into the media industry. Mr. Coombe contacted me through someone and asked me to look for a media company for him. Coincidentally, I was watching Jim during that time and knew he was looking for a media company too. As such, I contacted Easy Media following his clues. In the end, Mr. Coombe was satisfied, and that's how this happened." Jasper's eyes looked cold. He stood up and said to Jim, "Uncle Yap, I think this is more complicated than we thought." Jim looked coldly at George, who was on the floor, and said, "I didn't think that everything started because this B** star was coming between us. I was wondering why it was such a coincidence that Mr. Coombe got the news the moment I contacted Easy Media." Jasper peered at George, who was lying on the ground, and did not make a peep. He said flatly, "Get lost." After George heard that, it was as if he had received the greatest pardon in the world. He scrambled to get up from the floor before limping away. On the other hand, the other 5 fighters helped each other up from the ground before running away too. Julian looked at the figures of the people who were running away. There was a hint of regret in his eyes. He was still reminiscing this fondly because he did not have enough. At a distance, George went into the car and slammed the door heavily. His racing heart finally calmed down. After the fear went away, the bone-deep hatred started surging from within. He turned his head and glared at Jasper, who was at a distance away with rancor in his eyes. He despised him so much that he almost crushed his own teeth. B** starred. I've been mingling in Swallow Capital for so many years, and I've never suffered such a huge loss before. I was even beaten up by an animal. At this moment, the bruised and battered fighters all got into the car as well. They were all looking at George with resentment. "What are we going to do now, boss?" one of the fighters asked with his fangs baring. When he opened his mouth, it had tugged the wound on the corner of his mouth. He sucked in a deep breath from the pain. Even though George wanted so badly to slap each and every one of them and call all of them good for nothings for embarrassing him, he knew he could not do that. Otherwise, his popularity among them would disappear, and if that happened, who would still want to work with him? George controlled his bad mood and took out a briefcase from the compartment of the armrest. He then took out wads of cash for them. "This is for your medical expenses. You guys should recuperate for the time being." The fighter who was talking before took the cash happily. When he was holding the cold, hard cash in his hands, the wounds on his body did not feel so painful anymore. Even though they had gotten the money for their medical expenses, they were still pissed. After all, they were beaten up and lost their dignity as well. "Boss, we can't just let this go." George laughed sinisterly. "Of course. I'm going to see Mr. Coombe now, and I'll add more details to the story. I want to see if that little idiot can still jump around so arrogantly after this. We're working for Mr. Coombe now, and he'll definitely step in regarding this matter. I want to see how he'll continue being so arrogant then." Chapter 290. Jasper and Jim bade farewell downstairs of the building. Uncle Yap, I still have something I need to take care of. I'll go handle it now, Jasper said with a smile. Jim nodded and said, All right, go on then. I'll make an appointment with the King brothers later to see if we can get them to have dinner with us tonight. Jasper said, All right, I'll wait for your update. Looking at Jasper and Julian's figures, Jim felt deeply moved. He took out his phone to call Dawson. Dawson, you've got yourself a piece of treasure. Your son-in-law is really something else. After Jasper bade farewell to Jim, he went back to Senna immediately. Coincidentally, he spotted Hudson and Jack walking out after finishing a meeting. When he saw their glum faces, he knew something was wrong. What's wrong? Jasper asked. The people in Senna all have different minds. Some of them are willing to side with us, while the others are gearing more toward Dane. Now, there are two sides, Jack said with a complicated look on his face. It's simple. Punish one of them as an example to others. If it doesn't work, tell them to get lost. Jasper made a straightforward decision and smiled at Jack. He said, We just got here, and we can't keep pandering to them. I didn't give you this power for no good reason. You should use it whenever you see fit. Remember, we can't be overly cautious when we're doing things. Especially you. You promised to manage Senna properly for me. I'm waiting to see the results. Roger. Jack nodded. He could not help but feel impressed with Jasper's decisiveness. The biggest taboo of a company was to have big changes. If they did not execute it perfectly, it would affect the company greatly and cause them huge losses. Hudson was standing at one side where he was looking at Jasper with admiration too. He felt that the tactics of this 20-something young man were so scary sometimes. However, he had to admit that Jasper had a huge plan in mind. While the three of them were talking, Jasper's phone rang. It was from Jim. Jasper quickly answered the call. Uncle Yap, are there any updates from Easy Media? Jim answered, I just contacted them, but we can only talk to them face-to-face depending on the situation. It seems that they don't really want to talk to us. What do you think? Jasper narrowed his eyes and said, Uncle Yap, why do you think they don't want to talk to us? Jim said without hesitating, Perhaps something is going on, or perhaps they have another arrangement. Wait, are you saying that they might be in contact with Mr. Coombe? Jasper said unenthusiastically, Yeah. The Combs were already planning to come between us anyway. Plus, George, the man who showed up today, is not a good person. He might have talked bad about us after we left. Or perhaps the Combs are the local influencers of Swallow Capital. If we and the Combs both want to buy their company at the same time, who do you think they'll decline? Jim was breathing urgently now. He said in a low voice, It's going to be very troublesome if that's the case. At this moment, Jasper was the one who was comforting Jim instead. He laughed and said, Uncle Yap, don't worry. As long as there isn't a deal, we still have a chance. Jim said in a low voice, The King brothers are bad cookies too. I'm afraid they might raise the price in this situation. You get business from a discussion. If one raises their price, the other will make a bargain by slicing it down the middle. It's not something unusual. Jim chortled and said, Jasper, I can't view you as a young man in his 20s sometimes. You act more like someone around Dawson and my age. You're too calm and unflustered, because I know getting angry and anxious won't help with our case now. After chatting for a while, Jasper hung up the phone. Jasper rubbed the bridge of his nose. It did not matter if the King brothers were talking with Mr. Coombe tonight or what they had already talked about. Jasper could not do anything about it now. Jasper lifted his head to look at the two men in front of him. He was troubled when he thought about the matter with Easy Media. He said, Hudson, Jack, you guys continue talking. I'll go back to the hotel to rest. All right, we'll settle this as soon as we can. After Jasper went back to the hotel, he took a shower and felt much more refreshed. He sat in the hotel alone to think about the purchase. Jasper did not have many ideas about the purchase of Easy Media for now. Jasper had no idea what their biggest competitor, Mr. Coombe, was planning to do as well.